Okay, I would like to call this meeting of the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Stephanie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Fergus.
Here.
Mr. Manfres.
Present.
Mr. Overly.
Here.
Mr. Way.
Here.
Mr. Bush.
Here.
And Mr. Knox.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Stephanie, anybody else here from staff?
Just see.
Okay. You swear or affirm this the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
And do we have any applications to address the board here?
For public forum, no.
No? Okay. All right. We will make it available to the public in any event, but yes,
Yes.
please keep your comments brief. Okay, so has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting, March 23rd? And any additions or corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Call the roll, please.
Who was our second? Mr. Fergus.
Approved.
Mr. Manfres.
Approve.
Mr. Overly.
Approve.
Mr. Way.
Approve.
Mr. Bush.
Approved.
And Mr. Knox.
Approve.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Good. All right, let's move on to continued applications. First one is EF 2203002. Address is 240 South McDowell Street, River and Rich 2. And the applicant is Griffin Caldwell, owned by Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. Staff report, please.
Thank you. As stated, this is continued application EF 2203002, 240 South McDowell Street. This is a request for action for new construction, landscaping, and a lot split and combination. The applicant is requesting review and action for the River and Rich 2 mixed-use development located within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The project would redevelop about 5 acres of currently vacant blocks bounded by West Ridge Street to the north, McDowell Street to the east, the Dodge Park Recreation Center to the south, and May Avenue to the west. The current development plan includes the following: a 4-story residential building on the south portion of the site with 114 apartments, a mix of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom units with a partially covered surface parking lot along the Dodge Park frontage. A 5-story mixed-use building on the northern portion of the site with a 1-level parking garage and amenity deck above. Included in this building is ground floor retail and commercial fronting Rich Street and wrapping the corner of McDowell Street with 120 apartments, also a mix of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom units above on floors 2 through 5. The proposal includes affordable housing units. There's also a private central landscape east-west pedestrian views, which includes murals, the main entry to the southern building, access to the amenity deck at the northern building, and an elevated pedestrian walkway. The proposal also includes bicycle parking at the northern building. The proposed parking setback on the south and west property line is 1 foot. The code establishes 5 foot as the minimum, so a parking setback modification is requested. The proposal requires a lot split of this parcel, 010040470, and then a lot combination of the eastern portion of parcel 010040470 and parcel 010006542 per the provided site plan. The primary changes to this application from the last review in March 2022 include changes to the northern building on the southern elevation. The applicant added more windows to the corner units facing the amenity deck. The May Avenue elevation, they added public art and murals to the first floor walls at the parking garage. On the southern building, the northern elevation, there are additional instances where the dark metal cladding serves to connect the upper levels to the base. And then on the south elevation and parking court, they lowered the soffit height at the tuck under parking areas and added instances of the dark metal paneling, and then identified the location of trees. The application previously came before the board in March 22, September 21, June 21, and September 2019. At the March meeting, the board encouraged the applicant to consider making the pedestrian views more accessible to the public, enhancements to the May Avenue elevation of the northern building, reevaluating the window palette and location of window openings, and enhancing connectivity by stubbing the private drive to the west and including a crosswalk between the development and Dodge Park. The total counts for the project are as follows: 7,265 square foot of retail and commercial, no change from the March 22 review. 234 residential units, also no change. 198 parking spaces, also no change. And then 19 parking spaces along the private drive, which is also no change. The applicant will return for approval of signage and graphics and any additional lighting. The submittal includes a lot split combination plan, site plan, floor plans, elevations, renderings, existing condition photos, and material specifications and cut sheets. The proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklin Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends that a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate with a preference for contemporary building design and materials, and that buildings should include a consistent level of detailing and finish on all four sides. The proposal is generally consistent with these guidelines. However, the plan also recommends buildings contribute to street activity by creating an attractive pedestrian environment connected with and integrated into the neighborhood. Additionally, the plan recommends developments over 1.5 acres should include publicly accessible open space to provide relief and activity at the street level. Developments should also maintain or reestablish the street and alley. Therefore, staff requests the following design modifications: removing the proposed gates and fence from the pedestrian views, and redesigning the private drive with a stub to the west to accommodate a potential future extension of Sullivan Avenue. Staff is generally supportive of the overall concept and recommends conditional approval for the application. If approved, the board would be approving the following code development standard modifications: a parking setback modification to allow a decrease in parking setback on the south and west property lines of 4 feet, a reduction from 5 foot to 1 foot. So the staff recommendation would be a conditional approval, with the conditions being removing the gates from the pedestrian views, stubbing the private drive to the west, and final approval of the lighting plan.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff?
You have not included the crosswalk on the southwest as part of the staff recommendations.
I think they are showing a crosswalk on the southeast along McDowell. So I wasn't sure. I guess I thought that was the crosswalk we were talking about. It's like
So that, there was a recommendation for the crosswalk on the other side.
on the other side. Okay.
Anyone else? Not, applicants, will you identify yourselves, please?
Brent Sobchak, Casto.
Brian Bernstein, Realm Collaborative.
Gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yeah.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thanks for having us here again. I think Stephanie did a good job summarizing the changes. I think if we could start on the architecture, which as we were scrolling through, I think it was around page 30, the three main takeaways from last meeting and changes revolved around two on the north building, which were the windows facing the courtyard and the inn. In this package, we have the adjustment in the previous submittal, which let's get there.
Page 29.
29. Okay, so the next slide probably shows a little better. Okay, so this is the proposed changes. If you look at the top, the kind of horizontal does as it relates to the next slide. That was the area we were trying to address last meeting. Then on the next one is the May Avenue elevation. Next slide shows what the previous submittal was, which kind of had that blank wall that we talked about. What we're proposing is to add murals at locations that are entry point Then next, scrolling down a little bit further, it's on the south building. That south elevation, the concern with the tuck under parking. So we dropped the soffit down a foot. We also brought in some different moments where the metal cladding connects some of the upper to the lower, so it doesn't look like talk about it just sitting on top of. So you can see in this image compared to the next one, the moments where that metal cladding goes up from the base. Scroll down one, see the difference there. And then later in the package, we have updated the rendering, so if you continue to scroll down, that captures these changes.
Is there a specific page you want to go to?
Probably around 42.
42-ish.
Forty-three.
43.
So updated elevation capturing some of the May Avenue changes there. Next slide then would show the previous. Continuing on. This is still the original in here. This is, some of the metal panel elements coming up the building. Next slide should be the previous. Same situation here, and also seeing the May Avenue elevation there in the north building. Previous. And then this is kind of a rendering back into the site, kind of with picking up the landscaping that we're proposing, dropping the soffit down, and also capturing the time of day with some of the shade coming into that space. So those are the main changes on the building side. I'll let Brian get into the muse. For that.
I think it's fairly administrative in the sense that the last time we spoke and came before this board, there was an understanding that the gates could remain as long as they were time-based and open to the public during the time of day. And so that would be the proposals we've continued to keep as drawn. I think in comment to the crosswalk, I think we might have assumed it was along the May Avenue side as well. So if there's interest in adding that sidewalk to the May Avenue side, I think that could be accommodated.
I think it was in addition to this, adding the stub up and then making it like an intersection.
Gentlemen, could I ask you to speak up, please? I
Sure.
have trouble hearing you. Thank you.
You want to address the intersection?
Yeah, that's fine. Adding the intersection with the stub.
Any other questions for,
I have actually back to staff. So your recommendation is removal of the proposed gates and fences. The applicant suggesting it's operational, that they will leave them open during certain times and allow it to be publicly accessible, but be able to secure it at night. Or for private events or something.
Just at night.
Is that, Staff was still interested in.
It would be our recommendation that it be removed, because the programming of a space is not something that can be a condition, that would be enforceable by any means. So hopefully the applicant would actually do that, but we would have no way of actually documenting that on the plan. So it would be our recommendation that they be removed.
One else?
You pull up sheet 32 or 33. I think we had some comments last month on this where that May Alley elevation at the garage was pretty blank, just block on that first floor. Doesn't look like anything has changed with the exception of you've dropped in some potential art on some of those areas. I think your comment was to possibly even break up that space with having some open areas, some glass, some louvers, some gating to try to break up that space. It's a pretty large pedestrian walkway right there, and it's a full block of just block.
So you're asking the applicant if they had considered, I mean, this is what they're coming back and proposing to us is basically using art to help them break it.
To help break that up just purely with art.
Yeah.
When we show art on a project like this, how do we hold that account? Just like the fence and programming, how do we know that art will actually be, it's not something that an inspector or a plan will be looking for or showing for C of O. It's just a matter of whether they want to do it or not.
Yes, I mean, when the drawings come to me to stamp for the COA, the permit set, they would typically just identify the drawing and the location of the future art. But it wouldn't have to be like totally fleshed out as to what it's going to be. And to your point, it may or may not require a graphics permit. And that would really be the check and balance moving forward with it.
We're jumping around here, but back to the gates for a second. Isn't part of the reason for the gates that I could, if they were open 24/7, I could get up onto the amenity deck, right? So that's a part of protecting the residents of the.
Correct.
There are stairs from the amenity deck coming down in that area.
Correct.
Is that shown on anything?
Yes, there's on this north building. It's one up maybe. I think it's one up, two up.
I think page 31.
So it's an open stair or is it key carded?
I think that would be based on the accessibility to the view.
Again, please speak up. I can't hear you, and we're
Apologies.
not making a record without,
Apologies.
and that includes the board too. Everybody speak up a little bit here.
It depends on if the view is open to the public.
So if the gates from to the Mew were removed, you have the potential to put a gated stair.
We would have to key card that stair,
Right.
correct?
Do you have any elevations of the elevated walkway between the two buildings?
I don't think it shows in this package.
Would anyone else find that helpful?
Yeah, I thought that was something that we asked about last month, is if that becomes a public walkway between the buildings, that bridge is very accessible and aesthetically shown from public view. I think we'd certainly like to see what that looks like, what it's made out of. If there's any detail on that, if you give us a view looking down the public views, showing that bridge or your design intent, would be great.
Anyone else?
I think the other design updates look good. The changes to the stacking piece looks good to me. I'm sort of back and forth on the gate issue. I think I understand the operational reasons for that, and certainly gravity has similar sorts of situations. But it would be nice if it were left as public space. So if there's another way to do it, to secure that, then I think it would be a really nice thing for the public realm of McDowell Street.
I think just the way that walkability of the neighborhood, I think that would actually just removing them, especially if you have the option to add that key card to prevent further humidity. Such as, yeah, I think that would probably be the best thing.
All right, so try to build some kind of consensus here where we're at on this. I'm reading that there seems to be some division here regarding the gate to the, are we asking what are we asking out of the applicant is the bottom line here.
I think we're seeing if the applicant would be willing to remove the gates and find another way to secure the amenity deck.
So you don't mind scrolling up, please, to the elevations of the gates.
Maybe what, 43? Uh, 46? If we could keep the fencing and provide an opening,
Like the indication of like a gateway, like into the MU, but that the gates would not be there.
So
They're sort of side
it's
over top.
protected, but it's accessible.
Just feels like a threshold that would cross through.
I'd be fine with that.
Everybody agree with that? Okay. All right, so that's one issue.
Do we feel comfortable approving it as a board with no pictures of any of that walkway across the?
How about they come back with, we could approve it, but they come back with some rendering or some detail of the walkway. And I think we could approve it as a separate piece.
And Kim, you had the most comments about the May Alley block on the first floor.
Yeah, I didn't comment on that bridge at all, so.
Not the bridge, the block on the first floor of May Alley.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with everything that I see. I think the applicant's done a great job of responding to our comments over between different meetings. And I think I don't have a problem with it, other than the little things we talked about that they've already agreed to take care of. I think it's a really nice project.
Okay, so it sounds like we need a motion at this point. We are subject to, I'm going to ask approval subject to changes to the pedestrian gate. Anything else we're subject to?
And that the applicant come back to present elevations and maybe a rendering of the walkway, the elevated walkway.
Okay, so we got those two.
Sorry, apologies. I noted stubbing the Sullivan Avenue and adding a crosswalk. Removing the gates, so fence can stay, but it's not gated at the news.
So could I just ask the applicant, I think your comment was you're just gonna move that center section of that elevation, is that right, where you're gonna be? So all it is just taking out, it's gonna look just like it is without.
Correct.
I'm not fine with that without coming back.
So remove the gate. Stubbing Sullivan and with a crosswalk. And then final approval of the walkway. And then I had just also noted final approval of any additional lighting. We have the lighting details for like the balconies and the entries, but if there's going to be any like up lighting for the building, any additional lighting than what we have, we would want to come back to that.
So lighting and signage. And the walkway.
Yeah, we don't need to make signage a condition because it's
That's
graphics
future.
is a separate like permitting process, whereas lighting is considered an integral part of the building.
And you note that lighting is not part of this approval, even, right? That's a separate.
No, there is some lighting that is a part of this. There's like I think there's sconces at the balconies and like the entry lights and there some street light poles, but any like uplighting for the building or landscaping lighting, they didn't have any of that in this package.
Okay, I'm gonna try and make a motion. Let's see what happens.
Best of luck.
Chair moves that the application be approved subject to the following. Board, subject to board review of the following. Design of the elevated walkway. Redesign of, removal and redesign of the gate to the public area.
Streets,
The streets, lighting and signage. Anything else?
street, inspection, crosswalk.
And the stubbing of, for the future extension of Sullivan Avenue and a crosswalk. That suit the bill?
Second.
And it's been seconded.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Overly for a conditional approval, with the conditions being board approval, board review of the design of the elevated walkway, removal and redesign of the gate at the pedestrian mews, any additional lighting, a redesign and stub for future extension of Sullivan, and then addition of a crosswalk there. Got it? Okay.
Then moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Overly,
Approved.
Mr. Samansky, Mr. Way,
Approved.
Mr. Bush,
Approved.
and Mr. Knopf.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next application is EF 2201-001E, 501 West Broad Street, Gravity 3 project. Jessica Shuren is the applicant, and Gravity Project 3 LLC is the owner.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself.
Yes, Chair notes that Kim Way and
Michael Bush.
Dr. Bush are both recusing themselves at this point, but we still have a quorum. That's a good news. Staff report, please.
This is project EF 2201-001E, 501 West Broad Street, request for action for new construction. The applicant is requesting review and action on the Gravity 3 mixed-use development located within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The development proposal includes a 7-story mixed-use building, primarily consisting of a 5-story multifamily residential, built above 2 stories of podium parking. Integrated within the site is a 2-story leasing and amenity space on the northwest corner of the site at Broad and May, and a building that is already constructed, and 2 ground floor retail and commercial storefronts, one on the northeast corner at Broad and McDowell, and one on the southeast corner along McDowell. The proposal also includes a pocket park on the southwest portion of the site, and then the proposed building is 85 feet tall. The code allows for 65 feet, so a height modification is being requested. Primary changes to this application from the last review in February 2022 include redesigning the proposed park front May Avenue, relocating the transformers and generators to the rear, further east. They opened up the garage on May Avenue elevation, updated material elements for garage screening, refined balcony details, and provided some conceptual landscaping details. The application previously came before the board in February 22, January 22, and November 21. At the February meeting, the board encouraged the applicant to consider redesigning the park, providing conceptual landscaping information, and evaluating opportunities to further contribute to street activity and better align the first and second floors better integrate the first and second floors into the overall design, as well as update materials for consistency throughout. The total counts for the project are as follows: 5,296 square foot of retail and commercial. That is a slight reduction of 64 square foot from the February 22 review. 313 residential units, which is no change from the February review. The new construction proposal assumes the demolition of 479 and 491 West Broad, as well as 55 McDowell, all three of which were approved in January 2022 meeting, as well as a lot combination that was also approved at the January 22 meeting, which would be for 4 parcels and city vacation of the alley between May and McDowell Street. The applicant will return for approval of landscaping, lighting, signage, and graphics, as well as materials. The submittal includes a site plan, floor plans, elevations, renderings, and materials. The proposal is somewhat consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends larger mixed-use developments and higher density buildings be adjacent to West Broad Street. Additionally, the plan recommends that a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate, with a preference for contemporary building design and materials, and that buildings should include a consistent level of detailing and finishing on all 4 sides. The proposal is consistent with these guidelines. However, the plan also recommends that larger buildings should be divided into smaller bays, include vertical elements, and have publicly accessible open space to provide relief and activity at the street level. Lastly, street trees are recommended. Therefore, staff requests the following design modifications: more activation of the street along May Avenue and McDowell Street frontages by way of additional commercial and retail, publicly accessible open space, and/or first floor residential units, street trees along all public streets in consultation with the city forester, and more vertical relief along the east and west elevations. Staff is generally supportive of the overall concept, but recommends continuing the application to allow for further refinement of the project and incorporation of the recommended design modifications. Planning has provided feedback to the Department of Public Service as it relates to the requested alley vacation, indicating that staff would be in support conditioned on the May and McDowell Avenue or May and McDowell frontages being appropriately addressed. If approved, the board will be approving a height modification to allow a height increase of 20 feet from 65 feet to 85 feet. Staff's recommendation to continue.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Hearing none. Applicant, please identify yourselves.
Jessica Shuren, Kaufman Development. Priya Iyer, HPA.
Mike Soriano and EBJ.
Okay, for all of you, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
Floor is yours.
Great, thank you once again for hearing our application. You know Mike Soriano with MEBJ, our design architect. I want to introduce you to Priya Iyer with HPA. They're the architect of record. Thought it would be beneficial to have in case there are any technical questions as we move along in design. Appreciate the staff report. I think Stephanie did a great job summarizing the changes. We want to note a few specific callouts from our last several meetings. First, we wanted to update the consistency between the rendering and the elevations. I know that was a big point that as you were looking at renderings, you were seeing some discrepancies, and that was a bit of a timing issue. So we used the pause to update those as much as we could to reflect what's currently happening in the plans. We've also worked to reconfigure and better lay out our conceptual landscape plan. And while this is conceptual, it's fairly well developed unless there is feedback. So what we're showing on our conceptual landscape plan for the end of the submission is close to reality. I know that is a big thing the landscape and the greenery is an integral element of the project, and I wanted to be able to present that to you and give confidence that we are going to follow through on that. We've opened up the garage further along McDowell and May Avenue. I know the last two meetings, that was a big talking point. We had some of those louvered conditions on floor 2. We've really opened that up and been more intentional with where we're putting opening, where we're putting some of that green screening vertical element to make it a better pedestrian experience. We have continued to integrate level 1 and 2, knowing that McDowell is an important street for for East Franklinton. We did get the authorization to proceed on the alley extinguishment from the city, so we're moving forward with that, you know, in tandem with this process, so we can keep everything going. But I just wanted to note that piece of it. And lastly, just wanted to say we're really glad to be back. We've put a lot of work into this with you all over the last 6 months since it was conceptual presentation in November. We've continued to refine elements of this project that react to your comments, what we've heard from other stakeholders in the city, but also keep the kind of Kaufman integrity and aesthetic that we love. And we're really excited to add housing to the city. We know it's needed. We really want to add it. And so we're excited to present this to you today. As Stephanie noted, we will be coming back for certain elements in forthcoming meetings, which we've done in the past with Gravity Phase 2. We are open for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant, please?
I really love the redesign of the pocket park.
Thank you. Yes, it was a big element I didn't specifically call out, but we heard your feedback and we worked really hard to make it something that wasn't really an afterthought or just leftover space, but was really an intentional piece that people would want to actually use.
I also like the redesign of the balconies, or the little
That
touches of modifications to that, and the way they drop down to the ground level.
Thank you. That was direct from some comments we had heard from you, I believe, at the last meeting.
Any way with the garage, I'm just looking at it and wonder if there's any way you get this kind of good pattern going with the windows above, and then you go to the 30-foot, 60-foot horizontal strip, which I think the screens help to disguise. But I wondered if maybe dropping in some faux structure or something could break that up a little bit and make it a little more in keeping with the pattern above, you know, so it doesn't, we know it's a parking garage, right? But at least it could, you know, sort of begin to mimic the random pattern and not just be a completely separate thing.
Yeah, Bart's a great question. I think, you know, right now we've got those precast elements that kind of continue the what's up above and bring that to ground, and then we've got those screen elements in the middle. What I'm hearing you say is potentially either within those or out of the boundary of those precast elements.
So if you go to page 25, I believe it's a rendered view of it. That's where we've really tried to carry down that zigzag element of the balconies down to the ground. It's a more decorative element. There's no structural piece to it, but we felt that that was a nice way to integrate what some of the greenery is doing, the balcony movement, and add some of that relief on that pedestrian level.
Yeah, and I think that looks good. I don't think it would take much to do what I'm sort of suggesting here. You know, it might just be, you've got I don't know if that's a 60-foot bay or it's a 30-foot bay, but if you dropped a couple of random faux columns in there that were part of the pour, then it would at least it'd break it up and it wouldn't be the total horizontal thing.
Sure.
And I think it's pretty well screened. I mean, especially if you look at rendering it is screened, but as I walk along it, I think it would help. at that level of kind of pedestrian.
Sure.
Yeah, we can take that into consideration.
What I hear from you, Mark, would it possibly on their sheet number 19, you've got the steel mesh that comes down that brings almost a shadow line of the balconies down. If you brought that steel mesh down over to the top of the garage door, so it looked like that came down a little further and broke up that width there.
I'm really just talking about the layer behind. So the concrete, the garage.
Right.
Finding a way to, it's long, horizontal, stacked, and everything else is kind of bric-a-brac, random, vertical.
Yeah.
So it could be some really simple stuff to break that up and disguise the 30-foot bay.
Right. I think we understand kind of what you're saying, kind of fitting that in the modules, so we can definitely take that kind of into consideration.
I had a question. If we go back to page 25, please. So, well, they're page 23, PDF page 25, sorry. So the elevation, the part right behind the blue car, where you have those, I guess those are concrete columns coming down.
Mm-hmm.
What's behind there?
Storefront.
Yeah.
That's storefront. And is that envisioned as patio space in between the storefront and the columns?
We hadn't really gotten that far. I think it's kind of going to be tenant specific. And I think there remains to be something seen with what type of tenant takes it into to how much of those columns we do. And, maybe we come back with that or we're removing some so they can put some seating in there. But Mike, you can speak a little bit to that architectural detail.
Yeah, and what that really is, and actually is kind of part and parcel to maybe, what Barbara was just bringing up relative to some vertical elements. So the intent is that material is supposed to mimic, or be part and parcel to the balcony things that come down. That's really a way to set up that retail, give it a little bit of graciousness away from the pedestrian thoroughfare. So if there is an F&B tenant, or depending on what that is, there's a little bit of gap between the storefront and the right of way. Gives also just some shade to a lot of glass as well. So the idea is that it has some depth and character on Broad Street, contributing to the kind of vibrancy of the street.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. One of the pictures showed, I think, tables or seating in between there, and then this one showed more like glass behind it. So I wasn't sure how wide that space was and if it was actually going to be used for something or just a place for people to congregate or what. I was having a hard time picturing that.
Yeah, I don't think it's wide enough currently for a big table. It might be wide enough for like a bistro table. So we'd have to look at that with a retail tenant. We did run this by. We have a retail consultant that we're working within Gravity Phase 2, and we have a few other advisors, for lack of a better word, that we've been talking to, and we did run this plan by them preliminarily, and they sort of liked having that little privacy off Broad Street, kind of an element that helps you go into the space. But as we work with potential tenants, we may revisit that and come back here. They're not structural elements, so there is the ability to space them out depending on a tenant's a desire to use a patio, or maybe they're building a patio that extends into the right of way, something like that. So we have made this so that it can be, we like how it looks, but it can be adaptive. If there were a really great tenant that wanted to, adjust that element a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
So it appears at this point, I've got 3 design modifications requested. We have addressed street trees at a previous meeting. I don't think that we have any issue with the street cleaning tree plan as presented. Bart, I believe you've addressed the vertical relief issue. That leaves us with activation along May and McDowell frontages. Any comments on that?
I think I'm happy with the coverage now along McDowell. At May, I always felt like we could have gotten away. It's more of a secondary street. But I think the layering of that facade is, as we see in the renderings, is really working. So I'm happy with the amount of coverage we've got.
Have you guys selected, you've kind of changed from core 10 steel to a weathered panel? Have you guys selected that panel yet?
No, we would still like to come back for materials. I know we spoke about that at the last meeting. We're still in the position, quite transparently, of working through the market conditions, like labor's done this and then lumber's done this and then it's done this. And we're seeing that kind of across the board with all our materials. Our intent is to keep this design the same. TJ, we have noted your preference for sure with our team, and are taking that into consideration, but on the larger primary material, we want that look to remain the same and are still working through that. Knowing that when we come back, you're gonna expect to see what we're presenting here to you.
Okay. So only condition that we have at this point, other than returning for approval of landscaping, lighting, sighting, graphics, and materials, is your condition, Barb. That, do I agree with that?
My condition.
Would be some relief, some vertical relief
Oh, yeah.
with the garage. With the garage. I don't know if we could do that as an approval with conditions, or
I think, excuse me, I think that is probably a minor enough detail that would be in addition. They are, since they're going to have to come back anyways for some of these larger items, the landscaping and lighting and
sure.
materials anyways.
All right.
I think that would be.
Not sure how to phrase the how to phrase your condition.
Well, how about, we move to approve the application as submitted with the representation of additional faux structure in the garage layer of McDowell and May Street elevations.
Okay, so subject to that presentation, and then further subject to approval of landscaping, lighting, signage and graphics, as well as materials. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
You're sticking to it. Good. I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion for a conditional approval, with the conditions being that the applicant return for final approval of landscaping, lighting, and materials. And that,
Signage and graphics as well.
I don't think we want to make signage and graphics a requirement. They may not have that flushed out by the time they're ready to move forward with permit set, and it's going to require a separate permitting process anyway, so they would have to come back.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. All right, so I've got landscaping, lighting, and materials, and then additional vertical relief along the garage structures, correct?
That should be it.
Okay.
They know what it is.
Yeah.
You know it when you see it.
Exactly. So, and that was motion by Mr. Overly, seconded by Mr. Burgess.
Correct.
Good?
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Burgess,
Approved.
Mr. Manfres,
Approved.
Mr. Overly,
Approved.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Bush are not here, and Mr. Noffi.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all.
very much.
Jessica, congratulations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is talking about the 40 under 40 at the one, yeah. That's the job. Okay, please send, our two intrepid board members back into the room on your way out. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to applications. Our first new application is EF 2204-001, 401 West Town Street. Chris Sherman is the applicant and Gramercy Artist Limited is the owner. That report was,
Let the record reflect, I believe Mr. Bush
Way is returned.
remaining recused.
The next two,
The next-
which will be,
Mr. Bush continues to recuse himself.
of course,
Got it.
if you want him to come in and say that.
Okay. So this is application EF 2204-001 for 401 West Town Street for the 400 West Ridge building. This is a request for action for exterior building alterations, signage and graphics, and then change of use. The applicant is requesting review and action for various exterior alterations at 400 West Ridge, including a reorganization of existing uses, new entrance and improvements of the interior courtyard. The proposal includes the following: reorganization of existing uses, involves creating a larger open retail area on the first floor, returning smaller tenant retail space back to artist studio and manufacturing space. The total change is retail 11,052 gross square foot, which is increasing by 37 gross square foot. And the manufacturing will be 17,306 gross square foot, which is then a decrease of 37 square foot. They are also proposing a new entrance on the south elevation, which would involve removing the existing overhead garage door, installing Horton steel frame with recessed LED edge lighting on top and both sides of the existing 12-foot 11-inch wide by 13-foot 11-inch high opening. Installing new full light double doors and storefront glass system with black mullions in new Horton steel frame to fill existing opening. Installing new 3-foot 4-inch wide by 5-foot 2-inch high Horton steel number address sign will say 400 vertically in the upper left corner of the storefront opening. The interior courtyard improvements, the north elevation will involve installing a new trench drain and regrading the concrete patio, infilling the existing cellar, new 4-inch gutters and downspouts and 2-inch drip edge flashing to match metal siding. On the west wall of the courtyard, they will be patching and repairing as needed. The east wall will involve rebuilding the wall with 2x6 over existing structural steel, installing 2 pairs of new full light double doors, new black corrugated metal siding to match existing, wood paneling to remain and be repaired as needed. On the south wall, they will be rebuilding the wall with 2x6 over the existing steel structure, new black corrugated metal siding to match existing, new window, 6-foot wide by 8-foot, 6-inch high double storefront window, new single full light door with storefront transom, no changes to the north wall of the interior courtyard. The submittal includes a site plan, elevations, existing condition photos, and material information. The proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends a mix of uses in the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The proposal involves reorganization of existing permissible uses within the building, resulting in minimal gross square footage changes between the retail and manufacturing spaces. Additionally, the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan suggests buildings should enhance the industrial character of the neighborhood and utilize contemporary materials and design. Further, the plan recommends larger developments include open space such as plazas and courtyards. The interior courtyard renovations enhance open space on the site and proposed materials are compatible with the overall building and plan recommendation. Plan also recommends that historic buildings be preserved to the extent possible and that lighting and signage be appropriate in their location and materiality. The new building entrance preserves the character of the historic building by fitting within the existing opening, increases the visitability of the building, and is stylistically in line with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The accompanying sign is aesthetically appropriate and not excessively large or intrusive. The lighting as presented does not appear to spill over beyond the entry in which it is intended to highlight. Staff is supportive of the request and recommends approving the application as submitted without condition.
Okay. Questions for staff? Okay. Chris, identify yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Chris Sherman.
Okay, and you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so this entrance was something we wanted to do, say maybe about 3 years ago, and obviously we haven't gotten around to it. After River and Rich's moved in, there's, the storefronts are starting to fill up, and I think it's about time that we sort of activate this side of Rich Street as best we can with this opening. This also adds another accessible entrance to the building on the southern elevation. And in terms of the interior modifications and sort of the reorganization of the uses, during COVID, we really, we have like a 7,000 square foot sort of corridor that runs down the center of the building, or at least that section of the building. And we had a retail change of use back here in like 2015 or 16 or something, and to do the indoor farmers market activities. And during COVID, we really wanted to space people out. And this was sort of we sort of took a look at the space and think that this would be a great opportunity to sort of expand some of the indoor market activities during the colder months. Part of that initial retail change of use was changing some of the spots, some of the units along Lucas Street into retail. So the way that I was trying to get around sort of addressing some of the parking concerns with just expanding the retail and not sort of swapping that back out into the arts manufacturing was to just do a net swap of the uses within the space. And that's how we were able to achieve that. So that's kind of the story behind that. And then the courtyard is something that's falling apart. I just wanted to make improvements and thought that would really sort of enhance the other end of the promenade sort of retail space. That's pretty much all I got. So, and it's good to see everybody. So.
Very nice. Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris?
I think it all looks quite handsome. I like the edge lighting too. I think it's gonna really have a presence along Rich, which is the idea of it. So.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of kind of that style of sort of, interesting sort of glow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tim did a good job with that. So.
Any other questions? If not, I entertain a motion.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded to approve the application as submitted. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Overly,
Approved.
Mr. White,
Approved.
Mr. Bush is still recused, and Mr. Notby.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Probably one of your easier applications today.
I had a whole bunch of stuff I was gonna say, but you're so polite.
I'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next application is EF 22-04-002, 500 West Walnut Street, and Jim Sweeney is the owner and applicant. Staff report, please.
And still noting that Mr. Bush is recusing himself from this application as well. This is EF 22-04-002, 500 West Walnut Street, a request for action for new construction, exterior building alterations, and landscaping. The applicant is requesting review and action for site and building alterations at 500 West Walnut Street, located within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The project would convert an existing single-family home into a mixed-use building. It would include an eating and drinking establishment with outdoor patio on the first floor and a dwelling unit above. The current proposal includes the following: a new 24-foot by 17-foot rear deck with railing constructed of pressure-treated lumber, a new 5-foot, 1.5-inch by 8-foot, 8.5-inch single-story addition on the west side of the existing house to accommodate ADA entrance, additional seating and a bathroom for the eating and drinking establishment, as well as provide access to the second floor unit. ADA accessibility would be by way of mechanical lift. This would involve a negative 26-inch side yard setback on the west elevation to accommodate the ADA accessible entrance. Siding material for the addition to be board and batten vertical siding in iron gray color. The entrance and porch for the second floor unit would be on top of this single-story addition. There would also be a new exterior stair to the second floor, which would be on the west elevation. Air conditioning units for the property would be located underneath of these stairs and screened. There would be a new covered entrance on the second floor, west elevation, to access the residential unit, a new door on the second floor, west elevation, to access the unit, a new sconce light fixture at the second floor entry, removal of the existing mature tree between 500 and 506 West Walnut to accommodate the new ADA entrance. The applicant will work with the city forester to identify a replacement. There is also a new 6-foot wood privacy fence and dumpster screening proposed, as well as removal of the existing chain link fence in front of the home. A new 14-foot 3-inch by 7-foot 2-inch concrete patio in the front with a 40-inch tall metal rail patio fence around the perimeter. And then the dumpster and wood enclosure is in the northeast corner of the property. The total counts for this project are 690 square foot of indoor eating and drinking establishment, 408 square foot of outdoor eating and drinking patio space, and 394 square foot of studio style residential unit. The applicant previously received approval from the board for a change of use and parking reduction at the July 2021 East Franklinton Review Board meeting. The applicant will return for approval of signage and graphics. The submittal includes existing condition photos, site plans, floor plans, elevations, and material information. The proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan encourages a mix of uses and architecture within the Arts and Innovation District sub-district with a preference for contemporary building design and materials that fits in with the surrounding neighborhood but is not duplicative of historic style. The proposed addition to the existing home is of appropriate size and scale as to fit into the neighborhood, but different enough in materiality as to not appear historic. Plan also recommends the historic buildings be preserved to the extent possible. While alterations are being proposed, they are subservient to the primary structure and allow for ADA accessibility to the establishment. The East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan also recommends screening between residential and non-residential uses, which is proposed. And then further, the plan recommends that landscaping be used to enhance the project, including providing shade and environmental benefits. And with the applicant proposing the removal of the existing mature tree, that does go against plan guidance. As such, staff would request the following modifications, working with the city forester to identify a replacement tree and location on the site. Staff is generally supportive of the overall concept and recommends conditional approval for the application. If approved, the board would be approving the following code development modification standard, reducing the side yard setback on the west elevation from 0 foot to negative 26 inches. And in summary, staff recommends conditional approval with the condition being that the applicant work with the city forester to provide an appropriate replacement tree on the property.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
As far as staff approval, do you worry about the easement that would be required for that negative setback?
Not really. That would be something that BZS would be looking at. I'm not even 100% certain that we need to note that negative 26-inch side yard setback, but I thought it would be better to have it included as a part of the approval than, and then not need it than the other way around.
So going over the property requires the other property owner to support them.
Yes.
And that's been noted.
This board cannot compel that approval.
The applicant can,
No, you know, I just know if you had something, you don't have.
I don't have anything in the package.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
That's a easy.
if the neighbor agrees to it, the neighbor agrees to it. If they don't, well, they'll be back.
The neighbor's here. Okay.
So I gather the neighbor is going to approve it, going to agree to it.
The neighbor's like, negative 26 inches.
Let's say that.
Wait a second.
Okay.
Jim in?
Excuse me?
Swear Jim in?
Yeah, let's swear him in. Okay, Mr. Sweeney, state your name for the record,
James E. Sweeney?
and you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Appreciate y'all letting me back in this chair again. One spot. Good for that. Yeah, I appreciate the attention. I'd like to commend staff on her hard work on helping me get this together. I think it all kind of speaks for itself. You've heard this story a few times as I've been here on various different ways to talk about this project, so I won't bore you with it again. I'll just make myself available for questions.
You're showing a 6-foot fence across the back into the backyard. Is that planned on being permanent, or will that tie into the alley and the neighbors and the general Walnut plan that you're working on?
Correct, the second part. Yeah, there will be a lot of different conversations and maybe return visits here to speak to you all. As you know, Walnut Street is one of those little cracks in Franklinton that has not really been that hard or addressed. We don't have an alley running behind our properties. We want one. And so a lot of this is addressing the existing conditions today, where we fully expect a lot of changes to occur down the road. As I said to you last time I was here with the Walnut Street, talking about the Walnut Street strategy, we're encouraging neighbors to do interesting things. My neighbor, Jason Dahmer, who is here, my neighbor to the west, is looking at what he intends to do with his property, and he's figuring it out. And there's going to be a lot of decisions. You're going to probably see us a lot in the next few years as we try to make the highest, best use of the properties as they are, and follow the innovative East Franklinton community plan.
I have a couple of questions. So one is the tree that's out front that you're proposing to take down. Is that on your property, or is that in the public right?
Oh, it's all three. It's on my property, it's on Jason's property, it's destroying the sidewalk, which by the way are completely ripped up at this point with new water. So Walnut Street itself is decimated at this moment with all that new infrastructure. We understand it's a very malleable environment at this point, so we're trying to move things forward. But to answer your question is, it's mostly on Mr. Donner's land. Some of it's on the sidewalk, some of it's on my land. I'm taking responsibility to remove it. So,
What kind of trees?
no, I couldn't tell you. I apologize. I don't know much about trees. This is, I can tell you it's been butchered by the electric department. I mean, or the electric company, it's up into the wires there. It's a non-attractive thing.
Walnut Street, it's going to be a walnut tree.
I don't think it's a walnut tree.
It's,
That I would know.
the interesting thing to me is it's like the only tree, right?
What's that?
It's the only tree, like in that section of the street.
Yeah,
It does provide a certain kind of character that it would be bad, but if it's in really bad shape, it's not going to survive because of all the hilly work, then
No,
that's another thing.
no, I'm all in favor of keeping trees. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I'm all in favor of more trees. As a matter of fact, part of the second generation of Walnut Street strategy includes working with the Franklinton Forestry nonprofit that's emerged. It's super exciting to put more trees on. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that's got to go, but again, we're working with a site that's 25 feet wide and a house that's 18 plus feet wide, and we have to squeeze things together. It's an urban environment.
So the other question I have is related to the property line and the staircase that you're building. I don't know how that's impacting the house next door. There's nothing here that gives me any kind of indication of that. I'm curious about that. And I'm also curious, have you looked at flipping the staircase so it came in from the rear? So you weren't changing the elevation of the front with this stair coming down? Because the south elevation here, I just find all of a sudden it's changing the character of your house tremendously. At least in the drawing it does. And it's troubling to me. And if you could flip the staircase to the back and you access that, the roof deck from the back, it would preserve that whole front elevation. And I don't know if you have to have people coming up from the front street, or they can come up from the back of the deck. I understand.
Well, the problem is there's no hard surface from the back. The alley doesn't exist. It's just a field.
But you could come up from the deck. So you could come through the house.
Then you're walking through, the thing is, the stairs are intended to serve the residential use. So they have to have a separate entrance in the commercial use.
So it's a street side access. is
Yeah.
what we want.
Yeah.
For the residential.
Correct. That have to happen. Can't go through the house to get, can't go through the bar to get to that.
Anyone else? Entertain a motion.
If the alley doesn't technically, a paper alley doesn't technically exist, you've got the trash showing coming off the alley with a bar restaurant there that's gonna have quite a bit of trash. Is the plan just to do a private trash service?
Yeah.
And they'll pick up off of a non-existent alley, or will you be wheeling somewhere, or somebody be?
We'll wheel it if we have to. We can wheel it 31 feet to the west to Mead Alley.
You've probably already had all those conversations with your neighbors. I'm just trying to think through it.
I understand.
And from a zoning standpoint, this probably goes back to BZA as well. The stairwell that'll be built essentially on the property line will now need to be a fire rated stairwell, and that's all in the architectural code and building code. So that's not something we'll necessarily deal with. We're just worried about the property line and the setback.
Anyone else? We have a motion.
I just had a quick question. So the second story residential space, is that going to be just an efficiency apartment? Is that what you had in mind?
Yes.
Okay. Not connected at all to the downstairs?
No.
And it being owner occupied, or is that going to be a rental?
Do I need to decide that at this point?
Probably not.
And I don't.
I'm just wondering from a noise and build out and access and whatever.
Knowing me, I'll probably just live in it. Because I'm lazy.
I don't have any.
Any further questions from anybody?
No, he's going to BZA, so I move to approve as submitted.
May we add the condition that the applicant work with the city forester, provide an appropriate replacement tree on the property?
Sure where that will fit.
Yeah, do you have any idea where you would put that?
Well, the deck doesn't take the entire backyard. There's more space.
Okay.
It'll be back there.
I think you did have a tree on the diagram, didn't you?
Yeah, it's here, and that's an existing tree.
That's existing. Okay.
You can't put the tree in front.
Let's split it. I mean, it could go into what is the northwest corner of the backyard.
Just seems like you're losing it. It's contributing to public environment, just putting it in the back. It's not helping anybody else out. It is replacing the tree, which is good. It's also good to replace trees.
The tree is in the side.
Yeah, it's growing through the sidewalk. It's quite a mess.
I mean, you have like a 4-foot sidewalk in front.
And
And then
that's
it's,
broken, and it's got about a 3-inch gap between.
there's
the
no
two
tree
places.
lawn, it's,
No, there's no tree lawn. It's just a mess.
bamboo screen, I'm thinking bamboo screen.
All right, it has been moved to conditionally approve the application on the condition that the applicant work with the city forester, provide an appropriate replacement tree on the property. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Stephanie, call roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Overly,
Approved.
Mr. Wang,
Disapproved.
or Luther. Mr. Bush is still recused, and Mr. Nuppy.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
next application is EF 22-04003. Address is 567 West Broad Street. The applicant is Richard, butchers this, Josity, excuse me?
Close.
Close, Meraki Architects LLC, and the owner is Lifelong Learning Administrative Corporation. Stephanie, staff report, please.
We need to get Mr. Bush back.
All right. Oh, good idea. Okay. Everybody's in attendance there, now in the room. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is application EF 22-04003 for 567 West Broad Street. This is a request for action for exterior building alterations, landscaping, and a change in use. The applicant is requesting review and action on a proposed change of use and accompanying exterior building and site alterations for a project located within the West Broad Street subdistrict. Proposal includes interior alterations to combine two separate retail spaces into a single space to be used as a charter school. The exterior alterations include tuck pointing and repair of exterior masonry, deteriorated steel lintel repair, entrance reconfiguration, the west entrance on Broad Street to meet accessibility requirements within the existing opening, exterior painting, removal and infill of existing overhead doors on the rear south elevation, and new windows along the east elevation. This also includes site work, which would be new parking lot asphalt and restriping, new landscaping, new dumpster enclosure with wood swing gates, new 6-foot concrete curbing, and removal and replacement of existing chain link fence with new 6-foot high chain link fence. The applicant will return for approval of signage and graphics. The submittal includes a site plan, floor plan, elevations, rendering of materials, and existing condition photos. The proposal is generally consistent with the East Franklinton Community District Plan. The plan supports a variety of uses and architectural styles in the West Broad Street subdistrict with a preference for contemporary design and materials. However, the plan recommends that historic buildings should be preserved to the extent possible. The proposal generally respects the historic character of the building with the exception of the proposed painting of the brick. Finally, the plan recommends landscaping materials and design should be appealing and enhance the building and environment. Staff recognizes the purpose of the chain link fence, but recommends removal of the fence from the proposal. As such, staff requests the following design modifications: removal of the chain link fence from around the perimeter of the parking lot and restoring the masonry to an unpainted condition. Staff is generally supportive of the overall concept and recommends conditional approval of the application. If approved, the board will be approving the following code development standard modifications to legitimize existing conditions. A parking setback modification to allow a decrease in parking setback on the west property line of 3 foot 2 inches, a reduction from 5 foot to 1 foot 10 inches, and a parking setback modification to allow a decrease of parking setback on the south property line of 5 feet from 5 foot to 0 foot. Staff is recommending conditional approval with the conditions being removal of the proposed fence around the perimeter of the parking lot and restoration of the masonry to an unpainted condition.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Ask about parking. That's what I'm doing parking, but how much parking is required?
No,
So we're not, okay.
just look, we would just be looking at any design around the parking, landscaping, the fencing.
So if we didn't approve the setback, that means that some parking would have to be moved. Then I don't know what impact that has then on the parking.
I'm not sure either, but that would be a correct statement that they're proposing to basically just repave the parking lot as is. So those setbacks would be just legitimizing those existing conditions. So if those were not approved, then they would need to reconfigure the parking lot.
And for further clarification, staff, you're recommending that the chain link fence that goes around the entire parking lot as it is now gets removed and not replaced.
Correct.
So it would just be whatever else is there.
Yeah, so it would be the parking lot and then it would have the landscaping screening around it.
their plan shows to remove and replace with chain link fence. I was gonna say, would you be in favor not of the chain link, but if they wanted to do it an aluminum railing instead of a chain link fence?
A different style than chain link would be better. It would be our recommendation that there be no fence. If fencing needed to happen, we can discuss, the reason that they're looking for fencing, we can discuss that with the applicant. But if fencing is determined to be needed, it would be our recommendation that it be 4 foot, not 6 foot, and then that there be some additional landscaping between the fencing and the right of way to kind of minimize the appearance of that fence.
And there's no landscaping requirement between the parking and the lot adjacent to the parking. Thought that there was some requirement that.
Are you talking about the house you can see in,
I'm saying between on the west property. Does the code require that there's landscaping between parking, especially because parking is being resurfaced and all that, so it's like new parking?
I don't know that there's recommendation, for that. There is the recommendation of, kind of about, I think it's, fencing, between, or some type of, screening between, residential and non-residential. I think that, maybe mentions like a.
That's my
6 foot privacy fence. Yeah, so the plan recommends between non-residential and residential uses, screening should be a 6 foot board on board fence or other comparable material. Chain link is not acceptable. And we mark that as not consistent since chain link is the proposed fence.
Any more? Okay, applicants, please identify yourself for the record.
My name is Rick Josity with Meraki Architects.
Carly Baird, Flex High School.
Trace Simi with Lifelong.
And do you all swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. Stephanie did a great job summarizing everything, so I'm not going to go through the whole project again. I would like to address the parking concerns that you brought up. There's only 9 required spaces. We have 14 shown. Currently, the parking extends from lot line to lot line, and there's an area where it's double parked against Gift Street. So we're removing the one layer of parking, replacing it with landscaping. I'd also like to address the fence requirement. So in the staff report, it mentions the requirement for solid fencing between residential and non-residential, but there is no residential around this property. So we would like to maintain some sort of security fence around the parking lot just to deter any vandalism or to vandalize. And then the brick on West Broad Street, the current front elevation consists of 2 different brick, unpainted. So the former tattoo parlor has a gray natural brick, and then the remainder of the building has the tan brick on top. The brick below the tan is all painted already. So in order to unify the building, we would like to paint everything because it's hard to unpaint brick. So if the board would like Gift Street to remain as is, unpainted, that's. So,
What's the red band? What is the material? Is that paint? I guess kind of related to I'm looking at the images of the building. And, I could see a scenario where the upper brick is maintained as unpainted and there's some kind of a treatment of the lower piece. I'm a little worried about the red band being painted because I'm worried it's gonna look a little, I don't know,
Sloppy.
sloppy, be a way to put it, you know, just because you're working with the existing brick and, you know, I could see maybe some element if it's a branding thing with the school that's going in, you know, it could be a signage opportunity. But I think just as a painted thing, a problem with that. But I could see sort of treating that, everything below the red band as a painted or new finish kind of thing, and then you could keep that buff brick above.
If I may, the worry was because they're two separate addresses, 567, 575. It is going to be one business for the school, and we wanted to keep that cohesive look. If the tattoo parlor gray brick had been painted, I would have been happy to get a cost proposal to remove that paint. But since it's a naturally stained gray brick, it's a different material because it's a different building.
Yeah.
It'll never look cohesive if you don't paint the entire front so that it matches and looks like one space.
And the tattoo parlor is, former tattoo parlor.
Yeah, right.
Is which building?
The 575 is the right-hand side as you're facing Broad.
So it's the piece that you're introducing the new storefront.
Yeah, if you look at where their sign is up above, you can see that it's gray. My assumption was from seeing it months ago that was paint. It wasn't until we revisited after hearing staff's request to remove it that we realized that it wasn't. So the only way really for it to look like one cohesive look up front, unfortunately, is to paint the side. I like the exposed brick on the top left, which is why I'm happy to leave Fifth Street alone as is. I think the look is great. And if, in full disclosure, if I could have removed that to where the whole front looked like the natural brick, I would have done.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I gotta see what you're, I had misunderstood that. I thought the tattoo parlor was the building adjacent, but it's part of this.
Yes, sir.
I usually don't like paint. Last month, or 2 months ago, we approved a stain instead of a paint, which is kind of a better brick finish if you're going to change natural brick. But to your point, you're working with different bricks and you're not going to be able to stain anything to get a uniform finish.
That would be my question, is if I could stain, and I don't know the answer, right? We could research it. If we could stain the whole top to look consistent and not look, like we just threw some paint on it, we're happy to do that. Just to speak to the lintels for a second, the portions above the windows, those are going to need to be repaired anyway. There's a lot of corrosion due to them. Our colors originally came from the scarlet, that Buckeye uses, right? And we wanted to try to keep a little bit of that consistent on the outside. You'll see it on our logos. We realize we'll come back for signage stuff, but you'll see that red tied into it too. So we thought it would be a nice aesthetic.
Who's to argue with Buckeye colors in Columbus anyway?
It's going to.
It's a lot of pressure there, TJ.
I just think if you're gonna introduce color into this building, the little band is, I don't know, every time I see it, I think like one of those auto source stores or something, that they have that. That's the image that I'm kind of getting on West Broad Street.
But that's not what we're going for.
I know it's not. And so I'm wondering if okay, we paint all the brick. We got to do that to unify the thing. But do you take everything from the head of the windows down as a way of kind of unifying the fact that you have different window patterns within this, and you kind of make that the color piece? So I'm actually kind of arguing for a little more color or pattern or texture in the building from the head of the window down to the ground, which would be a punchier thing.
I agree with that. I think the color that is selected is kind of if the PDF is indicative of the actual color, it's kind of a taupish. And that's, it's a lot of building to just be painting kind of a taupe. And that may solve some of the issue if it's a different tone or if it's a different color on the bottom half as opposed to the top half. To your sign ban point, I agree with Bart with just painting a linear line on a surface like brick can get sloppy.
Sure.
If
I don't think that's a good representation. If the lintel's about this tall and only runs, my understanding is along the window. So the stripe actually wouldn't be consistent. Where there's blocks of lintels, I call them eyebrows, right? You'd see the spots of red there, not as a AutoZone kind of direct. And I agree with what you're saying, that wouldn't look good, but not a straight line across. It was designed to just be literally on top of the glass, not attached to the brick, if that makes sense.
different than the rendering.
Slightly, yeah. It wouldn't be a consistent red line. It would be broken up literally just above the glass. Rick, did I say that right?
If that's what you want.
It is.
But I actually think if it's broken up even more, then it's not doing what you're trying to do. I mean, the building itself, let's face it, it's got some things you're trying to kind of bring a lot of elements together. And so I just think you need, and I think it's cool that you're taking on a project like this on West Broad Street and, you know, it's in its current condition. It's not a looker, you know, but I think you can do something that gives a little more cohesion to this block. But I'm just very worried that if it's something that contrasty and that precise, and if it's broken up, it's actually just going to act to break up the kind of visual of this even more. So I would really look at some other ways of introducing that color and that pop as a way of truly getting some cohesion out of it.
Okay.
One of the staff concerns was the fence. What level of security are you looking for? You were just going to replace it with a chain link, not with anything above, from a security standpoint. So
Yeah, the back of the space, and the reason for the fence, I don't like the aesthetic of it, but it certainly seems functional given, I know there's a big redevelopment in that area, but from seeing it today, it's still pretty rough, right? I worry a little bit about what would take place, you know, overnight, you know, all the computers and whatnot, you know, walking out the back of the building. I feel more safe about Broad Street, thinking at least there's some good visibility behind there with that house and the garage with the house tucked back there. It leaves a good place for homeless encampments and that kind of stuff. So the thought was to replace it with a 6 foot that actually looked better, because right now it's about a 5 foot with a barbed wire foot cap on top of it. It looks horrible. So the thought was just kind of an upgrade the look.
I know that staff doesn't want a 6 foot fence. They prefer a 4 foot fence, but wouldn't be against a 6 foot fence if it was an aluminum fence that had a finish to it. And if it was a wood fence that was required or recommended between property lines to the west, you could do that. That doesn't seem like that would be an area where you'd have to continue the same thing all the way around. Quite honestly, I think the visual barrier between the motel and parking lot wouldn't be a bad thing either. So if they did a solid wood fence on the west property and a 6 foot aluminum fence elsewhere.
My aluminum view, something to have a faux.
Steel or aluminum, vertical or horizontal. I mean, probably vertical for a 6 foot for 6 foot.
So I have a couple of other takes on that. One is, I think that the Gibbs Street edge of the parking needs to have an architectural edge to it, so that it kind of keeps a nice line along that edge. And I would even advocate that instead of putting the landscape inside the parking, you could pull the fence back to the parking and put the landscaping along the street.
Take the fence up and tie it take it into the trash enclosure.
I would take it up to the property line of the building that's there, the existing adjacent building.
Okay.
So I think that could be something different. But it could, and so my other concern is that there's no sidewalk on Shepherd Street, right? And you look at the pictures of it, it's just all weeds, unkept, and nothing. I'm concerned about that edge. And I would actually advocate that the landscape would wrap around Shepherd Street. So you basically have to take out 2 spaces. And so you're basically screening the parking. I could almost live with just the fence on Gift, but if you had want a fence, I think that the fence that runs along Shepherd probably could be different. You know, back to the, or it could all be the same. So I was thinking that on Gift, it might be something a little bit nicer, just because that's a key kind of north-south street. But Shepherd could be, you know, and the property line could be something else.
But if my recollection is correct, I mean, you can still see it regardless, like I could attest to that fence that's back there now, it's kind of horrible and scary and kind of looks, not out of the neighborhood, but, you know, that area of Shepherd, it's not necessarily walkable, but if you're doing,
But it's a corner.
yes, it's a corner there, but you can still see that back area too, so maybe like wrapping the landscaping is
Well, that's, so I guess in an ideal world, going back to what TJ was saying, I would have a nicer fence that came down Gift, turned the corner on Shepherd with landscaping. And then in between, the property could be a wooden fence. I wouldn't be objecting to that because but I just think that that corner, that edge, you know, a neighborhood edge, I think needs to be treated a little bit different. And I think the additional landscaping on the south side would help screen the parking, just create some amenity, just something attractive.
I agree.
Other than that, maybe that's a major comment, but that's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Have you talked at all with the property owner that's adjacent to you along Gift?
No, sir. You talking about the house?
Yeah.
No, the seller's agent wasn't very kind in speaking about that home. We understand that I think there's some problem tenants in there right now, and in full disclosure, my hope is one day to buy it and knock it down and add onto our parking and kind of clean that up, but one step at a time.
Would your fence wrap around that property or would it dead end into that property?
Yeah, the property kind of creates its own quote unquote fence line along Gift, right? So it would actually just pick up next to the gray parking structure for that property and then run down.
Anyone else?
As far as the security aspect of the fence, so you're not having a gated driveway, right?
It's not a driveway, but there is currently an automatic gate in there, and our intention is to leave it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more
Chain
sense.
link gate.
It's there's a little 4 foot tall something, right, on facing out on Shepherd.
Got it.
We would just, clean it up.
Yeah, you put slight big fence, sure.
I think the only other thing that I just add to the whole landscape comment is, in addition to the fence, which I think provides that architectural kind of definition, but I think the plant material you have, the evergreens that you have, I think, the evergreens need to be continuous along the fence. I'd like to see it on Gift and Shepherd, so that you create not only the fence, but that you create a visual barrier of the park. And the other stuff, the small trees and stuff, are just additive to my mind. But I think the key thing is to get those evergreen trees to create the visual screen.
You're talking about the boxwood?
No, the oxidant house, otherwise known as arborvitae.
Okay.
Right, those are the GOs, right? Oh, did I?
Those are on the
Oh, sorry.
dumpster.
What's the boxwood? No. So, okay. So I would go with something that's going to grow taller than the boxwood. Boxwood would take forever to grow. And the arborvitae would be really fast. So I do that, it's screen. So I would recommend you go with that as the screen
In front of
your plant list. Obviously, there's other things you can use, but I'm just going back to your plant list.
You're asking them to bring that fence along the property line to the south, or to basically the one parking spot north of the south, losing 2 parking spots along the south, and then you can put plantings on the south side of the fence.
Up with the plan. Rather than I mean, you could go either way, so I'm not trying to make a big deal about the fence. I just think it gives, the plans will then reinforce that as a visual barrier. So the fence is going to be a visual barrier. You'd have to do a board on board with fence, and I don't think that's appropriate for that edge.
So I think this will probably be continued, would be my guess, but just one last thought about that tattoo. I was looking at this, and if you painted below the windows and then that's basically your main entrance, is the tattoo building, right? It looks like that would be the main entrance.
No, sir, the main entrance will actually be on that 45-degree
It's
jog kind of, yeah, correct.
Because it seems like you could use above the window of the tattoo parlor as, like you do signage at the corner, you could do signage above that. And then because the paint is below the window where the paint is anyway, it'll let all of that work together, and then you can keep the buff brick unpainted. If it looks like it's actually in halfway decent condition. Why it wasn't painted, so I would throw that out as just something to look a little more carefully at.
Or we would still need to paint the gray.
On that
Above the windows.
On that 45-degree corner, are you going to cover that with a standing seam metal? Is that what that shows in the rendering?
Yeah, there's an existing signage that's being removed.
Yeah, but everything that's brown right now would be painted, like you'd be introducing the color below, and then you'd leave that buff brick band above, because it's got like nice texture to the brick. It's, you don't see we see too much red brick in this city. You don't see much buff brick like that.
What I was getting at is it kind of shows a standing seam metal on that 45-degree corner. If that is the intent, you could add that over the tattoo parlor
Yes.
gray to
ties
pull the
together.
2 corners together and then leave the buff brick.
Yeah,
That might be something to kind of break up the different brick,
yeah.
Oh, I see, put a skin on the former tattoo parlor's brick.
just from the windows above to match the corner on the 45.
Because it has some weird thing up there anyway. Is it a light sign?
What's your timing, and are you guys fine with a continuation with our kind of comments? Or
Joe Tremonti, I'm the general contractor, Pleasant Valley Corporation. Our goal is to start construction as soon as possible. We wanted to get the change of use approved so that we could submit to the building department. We have the drawings ready for the interior build out. And then the hope is to start that. We're going to do an expedited process for that, and then start construction as soon as possible. So at least we could get the change of use approved today, and then have a couple continuations on the aesthetics of the outside. Then we could come back for that. But we just don't want to hold up the construction because we're kind of under the gun for the school year to start in August. So we're going to be pressed for time in that regard to the end project. But I think we'll have a little bit of time for the aesthetics. The other thing with red, the thought was to also tie that red in not only to Buckeyes, but for the flex sign as well. There's red in that sign that will be a different application, that we'll have for the signage. But
So I think that's tied to the signage in general. I mean, I would think about that because
but are you?
the Buckeye red.
I'm not married to red. I thought it was a great idea until I walked in here, and now I don't think it's a great idea.
It's not going to be blue or yellow.
But I think the change of use, I would be in support of it.
But is the board okay with covering the gray brick at the frontage of the tattoo space with a different material. Because in essence, we're changing the aesthetics of it. You're not seeing a natural brick anymore. You're seeing a
Of the tattoo building.
Right, of that
It's a
gray
different
band.
brick and-
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, I think it could be, it's a signage piece to me, like you have the two things as was said, you have the thing at the corner, and you've got the thing with the tattoo parlor that are architectural elements that maybe it's brick and painted, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something that gets added to the building.
I think we understand what you need. My goal obviously is to have a cohesive look. You're saying we might be able to accomplish that by doing the same thing over here that we've done over here. We can start playing around with some different ideas.
But are we okay with painting any feature of the exterior of the building that's already painted?
I personally am okay with repainting the ground.
The dark color.
Below
Dark
Brick.
below not painting any of the buff brick that is exposed.
Quite the motion.
Well, I think we can approve usage and
Yeah.
then they've got our comments for coming back for exterior refence.
Yeah, so, we're looking at, conditional approval. Conditions, being that they return for approval of fence and landscaping and, exterior appearance and materials. Sound right? Okay, so moved. We have a second.
I would recommend perhaps motioning to separate the application so that the change of use stands on its own. Because if we condition the change of use on the architectural, they're not gonna be able to move forward until the architecture is resolved.
Understood, okay. So moved.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded, is that Mr. Way?
Yes.
Okay, to separate the application into the change of use and then the architecture. So let's vote on separating them out and then we'll vote on that separate.
Fair enough.
Continue and to approve. So motion to separate the application. We have a motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Wick.
Call roll, please.
Okay. Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfres,
Approve.
Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Wick,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
and Mr. Knopf. Okay, that motion carries.
Approve.
Motion carries. Okay, so now we will need a motion regarding the change of use.
Okay, so it's still, move to, we're gonna make me state this again. Oh, my. Okay, motion to approve with conditions that,
No,
yeah,
no,
Just
just the change of use for this thing.
so I approve. All right, so now we're moving to approve the change of use.
Yes.
Okay,
Seconded.
seconded.
Motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Manfres. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the change of use. Motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Manfres, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfres,
Approve.
Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Wick,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
and Mr. Knopf.
Approve.
Motion to approve the change of use carries. Now, we will need a motion regarding continuing the architectural portion. of the
Okay.
application.
So we're continuing the architectural portion of the application. So moved. I don't think we need to say anything more. Second.
Who was the second?
Ms. Bush.
Okay, we have a motion to continue the architecture portion of the application made by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Bush. Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfres,
Approve.
Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Way,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
and Mr. Knopf.
approved.
Motion carries.
Have we,
Do you have any other questions?
Just the, I have one real quick. So with the landscaping, when you're talking about the arborvitae's, are you looking for a continual fence line really with that, or can that be broken?
My recommendation was that there's a continuous plant screen in addition to the fence on Gift and Gift Street.
Doesn't have to be the same plan, just to try to break up the,
And it should be like evergreen, something like.
Something
The
that grows
visual-
together to.
Visual barrier.
Can you also just clarify for the applicant, the fence height you all recommending, were you fine with the 6 foot as long as it's a different style than chain link? Is that correct?
Well, if it's security, it's got to be 6 feet at least. I mean, 4 feet, anybody can hop over that. So
I probably could not.
maybe, everybody but Michael can.
Everybody but me can jump over 4 feet.
anybody who's motivated to vandalize the property could jump over the fence.
And then talked about the material other than chain link. Just clarify the landscaping unless you have any other questions on it.
So 6 foot is okay on the fence. We can do wood on the west side if we so choose, and then Gift and Shepherd.
I do have one question. Is the non-approval of the architectural going to affect the building permit? We need the exterior. No.
To move forward with the exterior construction, you will need a COA for this architecture that we're talking about. The change of use, if that's something you can move forward with through the BZS process with some of the interior stuff, we can get you that one.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
So our next application is EF 2204-004. Address is 640 West Town Street, 000 West Town Street, 647 West Chapel Street, and 641 West Chapel Street. The applicant is, the owner is White Cloud Investments, and the applicant is Arch City Development. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is application EF 2204-004 for 640 West Town. This is a request for action for new construction demolition as well as a lot split combination. The applicant is requesting review and action for a new 39 and 440 unit apartment building, 3-unit apartment building and surface parking lot located within the Dodge Park subdistrict. The project would involve a combination of 4 parcels as well as the demolition of an existing gas station building at 640 West Town. The current proposal includes the following: a new 5-story, 39 or 40 unit apartment building at the corner of West Town Street and South Grove Street. As presented, a height modification would be required to increase the height from the code allowable 35 foot to 56 foot. Parking proposed on the ground level for the north and west elevations. Proposed materials for this building include fiber cement panels, hardy plank, and synthetic stone. A new infill 3-unit apartment building between 641 and 649 West Chapel is also proposed. Rehabilitation of the existing single-family home at 641 West Chapel, as well as a new surface parking lot, and then the combination of the 4 parcels listed in the staff report, as well as the demolition of the existing gas station at 640 West Town. The applicant would return for approval of lighting and signage and graphics. The submittal includes existing condition photos, site plan, demolition plan, lot combination plan, floor plan, elevation and renderings. The proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The applicant is requesting a modification of the height limit to 56 feet from code allowable 35 feet. Staff does support this height modification as the parcel is located at the corner of 2 primary streets and is in close proximity to State Route 315. The plan recommends historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible. The applicant is proposing to renovate the existing historic single-family home at 641 West Chapel. Staff supports the demolition of the gas station as the building would be difficult to incorporate into the new development, does not contribute to the streetscape, and is likely ineligible for a local or national register. The East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan recommends new construction should be integrated within the existing neighborhood and where buildings are proposed in excess of 3 stories, include additional setbacks and design treatments be employed to mitigate that impact. The plan also recommends that parking be located to the rear or side of the buildings and screened. The proposal is generally consistent with these guidelines. As such, staff recommends the following design modification: additional landscaping around the parking lot and screening. In it, if approved, the board will be approving the following code modification development standard: a height modification to allow an increase in height for the West Town Street building from 35 feet to 56 feet, which is a 21-foot increase. Staff is recommending conditional approval. The conditions being additional landscaping along the parking lot perimeter to provide headlight screening and final approval of the lighting plan.
Yeah, thank you. Questions for staff?
Is there a landscape plan that's been submitted?
No.
So the staff's recommendation for additional landscaping is not tied into a submitted plan.
Correct. There has not been a separate landscaping plan, like identifying the street, other than what you see like on the site plan, just identifying those street trees. The recommendation is that there be some headlight screening along, some headlight screening along those 2 sides of the parking lot.
So will the landscape plan be submitted and approved separately?
In condition, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, applicant, will you identify yourselves for the record, please?
Sure, Brian Higgins.
Maria Anderson with Barney Partners.
And you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
I think this is our 3rd or 4th time back, just trying to incorporate some of the comments we received last meeting. As you can see, really the Town Street facade, we tried to give it more of a horizontal projection instead of breaking it up into, falsely into several small buildings. This sort of respects, across the street, there's this 1.5-story Pilot Dogs building that's masonry. And so we try to give a sense of that. And then with a lighter tone on the upper floors, it gives you more a sense of the openness to the sky. With regard to the 2 outparcel buildings, I think in the what Steph is showing has a little more detail in terms of materiality. We're really just talking about party board, but gives you some idea of color as we were considering. The new construction there on the right would have a little bit of masonry on that sort of half submerged lower level. And then the 2 living spaces would be, like what color are you calling for, Maria? Is that gray?
It's a cobblestone, yeah, like gray. And then the darker color is, it's also a Hardy product, darker, warm gray.
We certainly don't have any problem adding additional landscaping in order to help with headlight screening. That's not a problem. But I think those are the main points in addition to the things that Steph said. Is there anything you wanted to add, Maria?
Nope, I think you got
Okay.
it all.
Cool. So love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions.
So I appreciate all of the things you heard us say incorporated into the plan. I think the parking now is resolved very nicely, that first floor plan. You're still capturing uses along the street, but again, the parking is now tucked underneath. And I really like what you did with the additional houses we talked about. That looks really well. So I think you really addressed a lot of concerns.
Thanks. I agree. I love that little micro block is now truly a micro block. It's still, like those fit very nicely on the north side. The building to the south got a lot simpler and cleaner. On the the new build on the north side, I wonder if you thought about maybe just doing like a cultured stone for the base instead of the brick, just since that's a little more typical for, you know, kind of foundation sort of look.
Yeah, make it seem more like the part of the basement that comes above.
Yeah, yeah, might be a little more in keeping with that type. And I don't know, like the last application, we were talking about color, and I sort of feel like, is the north or is the south building, you know, either it could go kind of gray and white, you know, like really simple, clean. I don't know, but like the brown and the mocha and like, maybe it's like, it's my own sensibility, but too many shades of brown right up against the highway. Maybe there's a opportunity to introduce a little bit of either color or just neutralize the palette a little bit. I'd be the only person with that thought, but
Aren't the other houses, the existing houses that are there are all gray tones, so it's not fitting into that.
yeah,
That darker tone that steps back, I think that's a nice little touch just to break it up.
yeah, and you know, I think these could all, the north side, they could all be a little different. Like they're all stylistically a little different. Maybe there could be some color there, or maybe it's just neutral. I'm really thinking more of the big building to the south that it almost looks like it's kind of gray and white scheme to me, and then you got that brown brick base that I just think it could feel a little, it could be a little peppier feeling, you know, if it were not brown brick, but like charcoal, and you get a little more contrast. But it's kind of a personal stylistic thing.
Say though, like in that neighborhood, it's usually like right in that little section, where there's a lot of red brick and then a lot of gray, and a lot of gray siding and stuff like that. So I mean, it kind of fits in. I think it's kind of mixing and like looking at that with a little bit of everything. It's right there across Good Street, so like a red brick house that probably tie into a little bit more too. So
Would you be planning on painting that existing house and updating that?
No, we're gonna strip that shape that's on there now off of it and then buy the hardy. That's the elevation that's up right now, of the existing house.
Oh,
The new build to the right.
that's a different sheet than we have.
I received this updated sheet, this afternoon, and it should be updated on the agenda.
It's on the bike.
If you had previously downloaded it though, you probably don't have to.
That's what you get for working ahead, TJ.
I know. You told us to download.
Doing what I
you
said.
guys, right, what you get for following.
Yes, I would recommend commenting on material changes for the existing house.
Going to Hardy from shakes. I mean, the shakes are in good condition. So that'd be fun.
Might look good to break up the gable there with like even a vinyl shake.
Do that.
Which of the buildings?
Oh, that's the existing, but you could, yeah, you could kind of match it on both. Maybe that's a way to introduce some color.
Just gonna see this from behind. It's gonna have a little punch. Good changes.
Yeah, this one's come a long way. Looks really good.
Thank you.
So we've got a lot of pages on here. Do you guys know what page is the masonry veneer that's on the elevation of the larger building.
I have an actual sample. That helps.
Hot dog.
I don't know what page it is, but.
Sure.
I can see something like this. You can, okay.
You can approach the board.
No, this isn't the system that like snaps on as a veneer, or will this be?
No, those are actual brick.
Okay.
And then this is the hardy. And then this would go over the windows.
Great. Anybody else want to look at it? Sure works. Thank you for bringing those. Sometimes when the entire Hardy catalog or the entire veneer catalog is included, it makes it.
Thanks. You would like the texture of the brick, it kind of gave it a little bit of grit.
A little bit, yeah.
It's almost.
Utility brick.
Anything else? Do I have a motion? Go ahead.
Can I guess, can I ask a quick
You guys
question?
go for it. Go ahead. Sure.
The balconies are shown, are those going to just be wood framing? And are those painted a different color than the Hardy siding, or are those planned on being left unfinished, or?
They will probably be painted black. We'll probably use like the Trex system flooring. We haven't decided if it's brown or gray yet. Either brown to match the exterior palette or the gray to match the interior flooring.
Black sounds.
Yeah, with the handrails on there, I think if you painted it a black to match the Hardy on the corner, I think that would probably look good all the way through.
Okay, we can do that.
What else?
Anyone feel strongly about adding conditions on the design?
What about lighting?
Lighting they'll be returning for.
They will.
Yeah.
And landscape.
And landscaping around the parking area.
No, we didn't full landscape.
Full landscape plan, okay, full landscape plan, fair enough. And any other conditions that we're interested in? Okay,
I tried to sell everyone on charcoal brick, but it's not flying. Yeah.
So I have, the conditions, that they will come back, final approval of lighting as well as landscaping. And then, condition that the balconies be black. So
don't think anybody's, excuse me?
I think, yeah.
I thought that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right.
Painted a complementary dark color. Wait,
That's,
you can go whatever your dark Hardy color is final.
Sure.
that work.
Just not brick.
All right, so the conditions that were stated by Stephanie, chair moves to approve the application, subject to conditions that were stated by staff just a moment ago.
You have a second.
Second.
Do we want to give them the option to do the vinyl shaker? Existing house, and because if we approve it as submitted, then they have to do the cement board, right?
But you can get those shakes in Hardy.
Yeah,
Or so, I mean, do we want to add that as a condition?
it's up to you. I mean, it's simple enough that it could be a condition, but with having to come back for lighting and landscaping before they can really move forward, if that's just a detail that they change in the interim, if they get their final.
I just want to make sure they have the option to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm happy if they consider it.
Hardy, is Hardy okay? Not my own.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, like I've already showed. We were right.
Okay,
That would be preferred.
That doesn't need to be a condition.
Oh, no, so that would-
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Fergus, seconded by Mr. Bush for a conditional approval with the conditions being balconies being painted black and that the applicant return for final approval of landscape plan.
It's correct. Roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manthus,
Approve.
Mr. Vogel,
Approve.
Mr. Wick,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
and Mr. Knopf.
Approve.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brent.
Okay, moving to conceptual applications. First two are EF 2204-005 and 006. Address is 245 South Skidmore Street and 638 Sullivan Avenue. The applicant the owner is Jeff Norman Finance Fund. Applicant is Carrick Sherrill, Columbus Design LLC. Staff report, please.
Thank you. As stated, the staff report covers EF 2204-005 and EF 2204-006 for 245 South Skidmore Street and 638 Sullivan Avenue. This is a conceptual review of a project that would consist of new construction, demolition, as well as lot split and combination. The applicant is requesting conceptual review for two new 10-unit townhome developments in surface parking lots within the Dodge Park subdistrict. Both projects would require lot combinations, and the project along Sullivan would require the demolition of the existing building. The current proposal includes the following. For 245 South Skidmore Street, there would be 10 for-sale townhome units distributed between two buildings. One building would contain 6 units, one would contain 4 units. This would, the Skidmore development would also include surface parking lot to be shared between those two buildings. There is a site constraint on this site with a floodplain existing along Rich Street. And then this would involve the lot combination of 6 parcels. The 638 Sullivan Avenue proposal is also for 10 for-sale townhomes between two buildings. On Sullivan Avenue, it would be 2 buildings with 5 units each. Also a surface parking lot to be shared between the two buildings, and then the site also involves the demolition of the existing building, which was constructed in 1972. Units on both properties would be a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms with 1 AD unit at each site. Units would feature front porches, energy-efficient fixtures and appliances, as well as functional and durable materials. The price point for the units would be to be determined, but they are working to make them affordable using the land trust model. And then there have been no modifications to development standard identified at this time. The submittal includes existing condition photos, a conceptual site plan, block combination plan, floor plan, elevation, and renderings. The proposal is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan states that if infill development is at higher density than is recommended for the area, that a high level of design should be provided to minimize impact and increase compatibility. Recommended density for Dodge Park is 6 to 10 dwelling units an acre. The proposals as presented are at 21 dwelling units per acre on Skidmore and 26 dwelling units per acre along Sullivan. While the densities do exceed the plan recommendations, the design, materials, and massing as shown are appropriate for the surrounding neighborhood. Further, the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan recommends that buildings front the street and have direct access to public sidewalks. The plan as presented is in line with these guidelines. Plan also recommends preservation of historic buildings where possible. While the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing building at 638 Sullivan Avenue, staff has determined that the building is not eligible for a historic register due to extensive alterations over time. Staff is supportive of the proposal as presented, but notes that additional information will need to be provided on the site plan, materials, landscaping, lighting, and any development standard modifications that are identified when the applicant returns.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip ahead and allow and swear in the applicants. This is a conceptual review. State your name for the record, please.
Carrick Sherrill.
Okay, and you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I certainly do.
Okay. Gentlemen, first of all, the building at Sullivan Avenue. Anybody have an issue with demolishing that? Didn't think so. Looks like particularly not very good example of a not very good era of architecture.
Of the windows. Can you explain the floodplain issue?
Yes.
Sure.
Second.
There's, it is a localized flood area that is bubbling up from the storm system. It is my understanding that there is capital improvement thoughts about ways to reduce that, but yes, we all were confounded by the fact that we had, you know, the new flood wall and it was supposed to take care of everything, but no. So there's this particular zone has I guess a circle of potential flood area, and so it is causing us to pull the building back from Rich Street. I mean, obviously, the location of the buildings much closer to Rich Street would be more appropriate. Yeah, there you have it. However, the funding sources that we're using for this project just eliminate any potential for building up ground in order to avoid floodplains or anything like that.
How far would you have to build up?
We haven't determined that, but I mean, you can see how close we are to the edge of the floodplain. So I mean, we're probably talking about feet. I mean, inches. You know, but again,
That's the craziest thing.
the economic impact of the studies and the things that would be involved in actually determining the precise location of that floodplain and then guaranteeing that the level of additional dirt that we would bring in, as well as the, I forget who, I think it's the EPA that would then also require the replacement of some portion of floodplain contiguous to a different part of a floodplain. So it's kind of a swap where we take away some area and add it to another area. And so we just decided to pull the building back from Ridge Street and have a nice green space.
So again, I can speak that ideally the building would be on the street, right? And so I get this,
Yeah.
well, I don't get this floodplain, but
Can you speak to?
can't you just build it up above the flood elevation? Like whether it's like a foot or something and just, I mean, most of New Orleans is like this, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the short answer is no, and it's because of the funding sources. Partly because of the funding sources for the project. If you swore in John Turner, who's here, he might be able to fill in that information just a little bit more. Otherwise, you'll have to take my word for it.
I guess we better swear him in.
Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to throw you under the bus.
Okay, the man with the tire tracks in his chest, state name for record, please.
John Turner, City of Columbus Land Bank Program.
Okay.
So we're actually.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I do.
Okay, proceed, please.
So John Turner, so I work with the Land Bank Program. We own this property and we're in a partnership with both the Finance Fund and the Community Land Trust, the Central Ohio Community Land Trust, to build affordable housing here. We were blindsided with this floodplain issue. We didn't know that it was in the floodplain. And one of the sticking points, there are a couple of things. One, to build up the site, we would have to submit for a change of the floodplain map. We would have to do a map amendment. So, and two, there's kind of a quirky kind of conflict between the rules in filling the site and the flood and the stormwater manual of the city. So for us to fill the site, we would also have to have on-site compensatory storage. And that would be essentially a retention basin in front of the building. We wanted to avoid that.
So right now, you're saying everything in the blue line is a retention basin, so you have to replace it if you cut into it, which it really isn't designed as a retention basin. It's just a low point, right, that happens to collect water.
So the cubic feet that we build up, we would have to build a retention area of the same size.
So is the floodplain line surveyed? Is it an accurate survey?
That is another issue with this site. There is no base flood elevation determined. So we would have to go through a study to determine that elevation.
Is how do you know that the plan right now isn't actually in violation because the floodplain isn't exactly where that line shows?
That is what the map shows.
So
We also have, we have survey information from EMH&T that does accurately show the line of the floodplain. I mean, through their, study and engineering of the map.
engineering plan that's done.
Yes.
So why can't you just do underground retention in the parking area?
So
You already have underground retention for the size of the buildings, correct?
yes, so we will have underground retention for the stormwater, but as a part of the mitigation of the floodplain, it has to be at a level that's outside of the floodplain. So like the discharge point.
So when the Buddhist temple was built in the floodplain,
It is not.
that's what.
It's
No, it wasn't that convenient. That's fine.
What a karma moment it's in.
Look how clean that line is.
Yeah. Because, no, this is so tough because architecture aside, which we'll get to, but to make this concession for Rich Street, seems like you'd have to make a story out of the building that follows the magic floodplain line, or, there'd be, because people are gonna drive by and be like, why is that building sitting back that far when everything else is up at the sidewalk? So it's a very difficult condition that I would have trouble.
So
This is something that's never come before.
the land bank owns those two parcels that are on Rich that are unbuildable parcels currently.
So we are in conversations right now with two homeowners, or future homeowners, to build houses under our owner occupancy program. We actually listed those for sale separately. And we're working through the floodplain issues with those applicants. It's been a kind of a difficult conversation with the floodplain staff. So we're not sure at this point if those will go forward.
And those are two separate that are not shown on
Correct.
on your submittal that are on the other side of the block on.
Yeah, they're a separate owner, separate applicant for the land.
That's kind of Rich and Grub.
Yeah.
Could you explain how the difference with their flood solution, or how that differs from your site?
They are looking at a plan that would either fill the floodplain and do the whole map amendment, or different options on building it on basically stilts or some.
Would they have to, if they raise the elevation and did the remapping, would they have to do offsetting retention like you were talking about?
That is a point of discussion at this point.
I was just curious if it mattered whether it was like a multi-unit or a single family.
Yeah. And one other aspect of this, and it really gets into the floodplain. Those two applicants, if they build in the floodplain, they will be required to pay floodplain insurance, flood insurance. One of the reasons we will pull these buildings back from the floodplain is to eliminate that as a condition for the use of work requires.
Have you had any conversations with city officials about the remediation of this floodplain with all of the work that is being done down there to the water lines and gas lines and sewer lines currently?
So unfortunately, the improvements made to the storm system in this area did not account for this. Didn't even look at the floodplain. So
It's weird to have your floodplain that's not adjacent to it.
This same issue exists through down Sullivan Avenue to the west. Yeah, it just follows it.
Little dips.
Do we solve the issue if staff just unclicks that box?
Just draw the line around it.
Well, I guess my architectural comment was, why are we sitting so far back from the street? And if we could adjust the building design or the location to kind of pull it back up towards Ridge, but I understand now.
I mean, the primary goal of this project is to deliver a truly affordable for sale product through a combination of unique funding sources, the Columbus Land Bank, the Columbus Housing Trust Finance Fund, and their work with affordable housing. So it's truly attempting to do something that is good for the community. I could read the letter from Jeff Mormon into the record if you'd like me to, that kind of introduces the project and summarizes, she's got it on the screen, but summarizes a little more in depth of the information about the affordability. I imagine you guys have it in packets.
Well, I don't think anyone questions the need for affordable housing in this neighborhood, and I think the product itself that you're proposing here has some adaptability, as you're showing on these different sites, that, because of the massive, I wish maybe the details were a little less agrarian feeling, just from a stylistic standpoint. It seems a little foreign for Franklinton to me, but I do like the massing breakdown, and the idea that I could put this next to single family homes, and it sort of feels like it could be, sort of like the row house, but it also still respects a certain pattern of the way these neighborhoods have developed. But my thought is, could there be, and I don't know if it's this board and batten that I'm reacting to, or there are other ways of, if we're in this creative arts district, certainly it could be affordable, and I think the units are really kind of interesting the way they're laying out, but maybe there could be some bit of variety that happens within this type, so it's not just a kind of replication piece, but it has a little bit of flexibility in how it could be a little more unique for each condition.
Sure. And we can certainly take comments like that and develop the architecture of these buildings further as we kind of get over the hump of where it sits on the site.
Right.
And is this the right number of units, and is it okay to demo the existing building?
Yeah.
And is the parking situation okay? Then we're on the road where we can really start to talk about and spend quite a bit more time on window placement and sizes and the difference between this particular townhome from the other town.
Yeah, I think at a conceptual review, you're right. Like these
Sure.
These are things that are kind of down the road, but things to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with every item you just listed. with the conceptual application, with maybe my one recommendation being the 6-unit townhome to the north that is pulled off of Ridge has a essentially dead end on Skidmore. It will almost have a front door on Skidmore because the building's so far back off Ridge. So if that end unit or two of the end units turned and faced Skidmore to give it more of less of an afterthought on Skidmore and make Skidmore look like it's got more of a front appeal might help.
Sure, yeah,
that'd
that's a valid observation, that building is certainly, the end of that building is very nearly in a fronting position. And as it sits so far from Rich Street, it should really be kind of the front of the building. You know, that's certainly something to look at.
So what, I was gonna ask this question after the floodplain, but that's got me so bothered. But, so is the intent will these buildings be up, above grade, like a foot or?
I mean, yeah, the intent would be that, with the exception of the couple accessible units, that, you know, the floor plate, the first floor plate would be similar to what the rest of the floor plates on the street would be, which is typically, you know, 2-3 steps up from grade.
Because the one rendering of Sullivan shows handrails that like are on stairs, but there's no stairs. I was curious if it's a zero, like a flat entry, or is you have like a porch or something that you expect?
There are porches. They're intended to be porches. They're intended primarily to be elevated above grade. Again, there's on the site plan. There are two two that are marked with the accessibility wheelchair and that would be programmed to be more at grade entries.
So you could have no accessible units on Ridge Street. I'm not going to give this up. It seems like there is a creative and cost-efficient solution in this site. You know, that you could lift that site up and get it out of the floodplain, and then push all the accessible units to other bars of this development, so that you get the number of accessible units that you need.
The shopping houses in Orleans are all built up.
Yeah.
About 2 or 3 feet off. They sit on piles. And if there's water, just close it.
It just seems like.
I mean, I don't think the discussion is really about the floor elevation of the homes. It's about the fact that they exist within the floodplain period.
And that's an
I mean,
that's a
budget. It's an insurance.
It's an insurance.
How much is the insurance?
I think the other, I don't know, for this type of.
A wealthy Rich Street donor would like to insure this so that the
Are we
streetscape.
talking about federal flood insurance?
I have-
It's expensive is what it is.
I have FEMA flood insurance in my chapel building. It's like $400 a year,
It's highly variable in the zone
It is.
elevation.
but I'm not in a flood.
Right.
So,
Once you're in a floodplain, it does change things.
so have you exhausted everything? Are you still kind of researching this and thinking? No, no way is it. Can we build?
So don't build 6 units, you know, like if we can't build, make it a monument to this crazy blob of I don't know, I mean, I'm sort of joking, but like, it just seems like to do that and to, you know, to compromise the planning of it for 6 units that sit right behind the magic line. You know, it seems like that there's a lot of compromise along the way urbanistically to make that decision.
On the plus side, there's nice green space.
Oh, I said that before, yeah.
Yeah.
We created a nice little park.
Well, I mean, I think there is.
He calls them pocket park.
Right, I mean, I think there is value to, you know, a certain undulation in the frontage on public streets. And, you know, this does allow for the opportunity for something like that, to occur.
It's not, it goes against the East Franklinton guidelines, but that's by nature, right? So I'm cool with the architecture. I think all of the stuff looks great. I think we're all just stuck on this, really.
It was our first question too.
Yeah, what I heard many years ago, after they built the flood wall, that there was still flooding of like 2 inches behind it, and there was, what's that about? It's water that falls, you know, inside the flood wall, has to get out, right? Somehow, and or it's bump it, and I assume they bump it here somewhere, but this was supposed to be an anomaly that isn't getting access to whatever.
Mhm.
So now I actually discovered the answer.
Have any other comments to guide the applicant? Okay, well, that helps.
I mean, am I leaving here and reporting to my client that there's a level of comfort that, you know, with the positioning of the buildings and kind of gotten over that hurdle, or are we still, I see some shaking heads and.
There's still a level of discomfort, like.
Continue to investigate.
Okay.
It is what it is.
I think further investigation is warranted. Give us the results of your investigation, and if it truly can't happen, it truly can't happen. Right?
But the other sites are being developed as single-family homes, and they're buying flood insurance to do it, so. Maybe, but there is, you know, the whole thing is hinging on, you don't want to buy flood insurance because it's an affordable product. And, okay, well, maybe this particular site is better developed in some other way. Again, we're only talking about 6 units of an overall development that, you know, this is a type that can fit in, slot into other places in the city perhaps, so.
Is there
a little short-sighted?
Is there an orientation of the buildings, you know, give or take a unit or two, where maybe there's a 4-unit on Skidmore and a 4-unit that fronts more on the alley. The parking sits to the north of that and leaves the Rich Street parcel to the land bank to sell to a homeowner who is willing to,
Yeah, that's kind
who is willing.
Is there a scenario where we go forward like this, but that open space along Ridge is retained by the city as the pocket park?
That would be the expectation. It's going to be the best time.
I mean, it's 1 block from Dodge Park, so it's
I know.
not crucial.
Not very big.
Yeah. So that's a lot.
I would say that if we do approve it, that's going to be a condition for sure.
Yeah, right, because we wouldn't want a 6-unit building fronting the side of a separately built single-family home that comes down the road, yeah.
Mhm.
But I guess what I was asking though is there a level of comfort where we can achieve a similar amount of units with a different orientation of the buildings where the building isn't fronting Rich Street and set back, but, you know, could we achieve, you know, maybe a straight 8-unit building that is fronting Skidmore and we're still staying out of the floodplain?
Say I wouldn't know till I saw it, but I mean, I think you're on the right track.
I don't think that helps anything. Then from Ridge Street, you're just seeing the side of a building. I think you're almost, if you can't do anything because of the floodplain, this is a good scenario. And I think what I would ask for, if you further research the floodplain, and if there's any viability of changes that would allow you to move forward. If not, then, let's celebrate that green space and come up with like a really kind of neat design that uses that green space in the front. That's my opinion. I think that you can do what you can, and if for some reason you can't do something there, I certainly, to your point, don't want 6 units facing Rich Street and then have two separate houses
Right.
built in front of them. That would be terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't really like splitting the building and having some on the alley or or all of them.
Because the result is you'd still see the end of two buildings
Then
in
you
Rich
see,
Street.
then you see the big broad side of a building and green space on
Right.
from Rich Street. I think this is the best of kind of a weird bad scenario.
Just take this and bend it exactly along that line. Like, I think that would be sufficiently weird to make this worth it. Yeah.
Totally unaffordable.
Like, don't.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first building that has, that pushes a couple units out, like out of plane from the others. So, yeah, we flip that, bend it around, line a little bit.
So to provide our applicants with a little bit more clear marching orders when they leave here. So these are going to be two separate projects when they come for action for this reason, so that, what's happening on Rich doesn't hold up what's happening on Sullivan. So when they come back, would we recommend that they come back for another conceptual review for Rich and they can come back for action on Sullivan, or?
I think they could do that. I don't have any issues with Sullivan's.
Is that helpful, or is the financing all lumped into one? Or?
We're still trying to figure that out. This could go in 2 phases or 1. Sure.
Yeah.
I can't imagine another alternative to what they're showing for Rich. I still think the idea that you have units that are still facing to Rich, right, but they just have their setback. So they'd still have an edge. And then you're obviously reinforcing Skid Row. I can't imagine another arrangement that would. So
So if that's the case architecturally, if that's the best case scenario, I certainly, I don't think, other than maybe the end units on Skidmore turning so that there's doors in Skidmore instead of the ends possibly, I wouldn't vote against anything that's here.
The length on Rich.
On Rich.
Yeah, and really make them feel like they are.
I understand what you're saying though, and I think that elevation certainly needs some additional study.
This flood issue affects a lot of parcels west of 315. So the fact that it's affecting 3 land bank sites here, I would love to see a solution for it.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm sure you're working on it.
We are.
If there isn't one, then I echo the other comments, but I would love to see what the options are.
I think, just generally speaking, on an individual scale, dealing with the floodplain is a little bit more palatable or achievable. But in this scenario where we're providing, affordable housing and affordable housing that wants to maintain affordability by not lumping on additional insurance requirements, because these are for sale home ownership. If it was an apartment complex where, the aggregate income of everything could maybe overcome additional flood insurance, but that's not what the goal is of this development. And of course, the property values of market rate single families in this area may be able to also overcome. Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we have one last conceptual application here. It is EF 2204-007. Address is 630 West Broad Street. The applicant is Brad Parrish. The owner is Kurt Marker. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is conceptual review of application to have at 22040007, 630 West Broad Street. The application is for new construction and demolition. The applicant is requesting conceptual review for a new mixed-use project located within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The proposal includes a new 7-story mixed-use building that would include 2 stories of internal parking structure and then 5 stories of multifamily residential above. At the time I did the staff report, the number of units were to be determined. They still are somewhat, but they're thinking in the ballpark of, plus or minus 200 units in this development. It would also include a double height commercial space along West Broad Street. And they're considering some covered patio space for the future tenants to use. Various levels of outdoor courtyard and amenity space. This proposal does assume the demolition of all of the existing buildings on the site, and at this time, no modifications to development standards have been identified. The submittal includes existing condition photos, conceptual site plan, elevations, and perspectives. The proposed use is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan suggests that a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate for East Franklinton with a preference for contemporary building design and materials, and that new construction should be integrated into the surrounding neighborhood. Plan also recommends that buildings have a consistent level of detailing on all 4 sides and contribute to street activity. Further, large developments are encouraged to include publicly accessible open space. Preservation of existing buildings is encouraged where possible. And finally, the plan recommends the inclusion of street trees on all public streets. As such, staff recommends the applicant develop a proposal including a dynamically massed building featuring high-quality materials that is activated at the ground floor on all 4 sides. If possible, the applicant should consider incorporating the northern existing buildings onto the site into the overall plan rather than demolition. Further, identifying opportunities for publicly accessible open space on the site is preferred as a way to activate the street, integrate the new development into the neighborhood, and break up the large building. The applicant should work with the city forester to include street trees as appropriate across the site. Staff would support a taller building at this location as a way to incorporate more uses on the ground floor and as a strategy for making the massing of the building less boxy to create a strong presence on West Broad, but still being respectful of the surrounding buildings. Staff is supportive of the proposed use, but notes that additional information will be needed regarding the site plan, materials, landscaping, lighting, demolition, and any development standard modifications once the applicant returns for action.
Okay, thank you. Applicants, state your name for record, please.
Grant Dalton, Market Development.
Brad Parrish with Archall Architects.
Gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Okay, let the discussion commence. First of all, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. So we've been working in Franklinton, working on assembling some ground now since started this conversation with Carmen Menduni, who used to operate out at the Columbus Art Memorial about 2018. Thankfully, he chose us to be that partner to kind of take on what could happen with the site. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but now we're trying to move forward on a path forward for development. We did acquire that Ohio hydraulic piece to round out the entire block, so we do own the entire 1.04 acres for that perfect square over there on 630 West Broad Street. That led to the 642 piece as well adjacent, but unsure right now what that stands for. Been working in Franklinton, working to get some partnerships. We did the revitalization of the Franklin Cycle Works down the street, so that expansion. Just working to do multifamily for this site, similar to the mass and scale of what we've got going on in Wiseman Park on Fifth Avenue.
So really today, we're just here to kind of begin the initial talks with this development, understanding capacity, understanding, the massing, the relationships to the surrounding buildings that are here, being that there's, it's a lot of the existing buildings around and kind of those relationships. I want the board, the commission to realize that, the diocese that they do are property owners, basically all around us except for the northwest corner. So I know that there are some discussions about the property north of ours that would, for the diocese. So again, we're cognizant of that. So today's really just opening up the dialogue and really understanding. Our first initial pass was of the site capacity. It was really about activating the Broad Street with a retail component with sort of thinner sound boutique, retail spaces that we intend, when we start to develop the mass, we intend to sort of pull the front facade to provide, sort of inset patio spaces so that we could kind of expand the Broad Street sidewalk in and out of the building edge here. So we're slowly a little bit talking about that on the corner. Likewise, we've talked about it at the entrances of those retail spaces. We would have a jump lobby off of Grub here that would serve as the amenity, kind of getting into the leasing office and then jump up to the amenities that are on the deck that's located on the third floor there. We're really trying to activate, instead of having just the sort of the H design that we're having, we're trying to create some relief on Grub as well as on Skidmore adjacent to the church. And we're seeing that we're, in the one section, I think on the next page, please, that we're, looking to sort of do an amphitheater step up so that hopefully we can, we realize the roof line of the church as well to see some more of the skyline of Columbus looking east.
So that's a cut through the.
That's through the courtyard.
Through the
H.
Down the middle.
Down the page, yeah. And so you can see that amenity on the third floor there really starts to connect the east and west side of that amenity space.
So it's two-story retail on the frontage. You wouldn't see any of that parking. That would be the screen.
I mean, I think that, well, a couple things. One, I think the staff's support of higher buildings maybe in favor of retainage of any of the existing structures. I wonder what you think about that, because like it could, I like this diagram, but I kind of wish it was poking holes in the Broad Street facade so you get some south light into that amenity space, and maybe if it went up higher, you could utilize some of the funky little things that are on the site.
So part of what we're seeing here is for that construction type as well. It's 5/2, staying within an affordable range for that product that we're trying to bring to market here. Going higher would change that structure. So that's just a question of what we're
the economics.
Yeah, but I think also, part of the discussion is the value of that existing building on site and really, as the structure as it is, do you guys hold the weight for that building versus creating a new dynamic development for the block that we're in? So that's all part of this discussion today.
Yeah, I mean, are there secondary buildings? What's the?
So those are two different buildings. One that you're seeing right there with the red doors is Ohio Hydraulics. It was it's pretty beat up. It hasn't been maintained for years. The other one was Columbus River Memorial is active. There's a significant amount of weird rooms and pockets through there. It's 20-foot clear, probably even more. They used to do monuments in there, so there's a huge lift system, but it's relatively dirty and years of abuse from sandblasting.
I mean, it might not be saving the buildings, but it might be like
bonding to them.
Responding to that kind of, instead of the mega block, it's like I get the 5/2 that there's an economy there that you're going to have to work with, but.
I have no sentimental value for those two.
I appreciate it. That's
Just the idea, though, that it was the
blue is cool. If you guys like the blue,
yeah. Paint the northwest corner of the new building blue with the red door, and I mean, we have approved previously today, and at our last conceptual, we were fine with tearing down warehouse buildings.
Yeah.
there's, in my opinion, there's nothing there that necessarily,
Yeah.
if it was something that was warehouse space or loft space or art galleries or studios or, then reuse and reconceptualize those spaces, but
Yeah, I'm not really arguing to keep the buildings, but maybe there's something about the precinct idea that, which is different than full build out of the block on all sides.
You want some breaks.
Hmm?
You want some relief or breaks to be.
Yeah, and that's why I was also thinking, well, maybe the breaks could be that the amenity deck pushes out to Broad Street, so you start to punch some holes in the, maybe the configuration is exactly the same, but you start to give it a little bit of relief to the south, so you get some light into that thing. Mix it up a little bit.
I got really excited about your cut section before I realized what it was. Because I thought
that was open on Broad.
When I first looked at it, it's like you're pushing the building back and you've got this terrace on Broad and you're carving it back so that the church reads through. That to me was compelling. And all your other massing was this big bolt. And I was like, what's going on there? And then I realized it's a cut through. And you're cutting through the church too, which I really think that you, in that cut through, you really drawn out the need for the massing, and that is you need to take that corner of the church and carve it back. So the church, as you're coming down Broad Street, you can see the church kind of appeals itself. I would hate to have just like this hard edge
up against the church
to it. And you can make that into a really cool space. It could be carved back, and you could actually have a terrace along Broad, so you could have the bead kind of.
that third and fourth story of the southeast corner can be cut back a little bit to.
I just think that church is so, that's a really dominant element on, I think this building needs to respond to it. And I know, you've got the traditional kind of 2 bars in the atrium and stuff, but.
It's actually kind of similar to down the street where the new Columbus Historical Society is going.
Mm-hmm.
And the firehouse is set back a little bit. And then the CMHA project is right up on the street. And so it gets lost until you get there, and then it opens up. But I agree. I think that's a good contextual cue.
Right. Yeah, that church facade's beautiful architecture, and so to cover that up from, the entryway from 315 would be a shame. So it's a lot like the Gravity 3 project that was just, approved earlier. They have the pool deck on the corner of Broad Street. And so an amenity deck like that on this corner could be something to think about.
There was also a discussion in the staff report about the activation of the all 4 sides. And we wanted to really have a meaningful discussion about that. Is in this area, I get that sort of in the Gravity world and the massive development that's happening. But because of the diocese or the adjacent property owners, is that activation really necessary at this level from this sort of urbanism on this side?
To add to that real fast, so the diocese is in control. There's the convent that's going on just to the north of this site. And then HFF, we've been in conversation with them. They're currently looking for a new location, and we're actively talking with them on that one. Then Caddy Corner northeast, I guess, of that would be another diocese-owned property that's directly north of that church that we're talking about as well, which is also the diocese. The diocese also is in control next to Restaurant and Rippers to the west of all of that. And so they just elected a bishop, but they're not able to do anything. It's a very complicated process.
So we approved the project, right?
Yep.
I don't know where that is in the process. I don't think it's been.
With the new spires?
Stephanie wasn't here.
The new spires?
What's that?
The new steeples and spires?
No, there's the convent is being done by.
We did something related to the convent.
And I remember that had a really beautiful public space in front of it, like a plaza and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's built off of the residences that they're maintaining the brownstones.
So I would really like you to bring in a bigger precinct plan to show with staff's comments about what gets activated. what does it. I think there is the potential to activate a side of the project that relates to what's going on with the diocese. Because that could be really quite interesting.
I guess my comment to that would be, who is that user? What does that user look like? And then how do you get?
Not necessarily retail,
Yeah,
but just,
I'm not saying retail, I'm talking about the activation of.
it would be,
It
would be a shame if that was your trash enclosure.
Yeah.
Next, next to, the
But it's-
diocese does all this.
Sure.
I mean, both the Gravity 3 project and River and Ridge, you have to have mechanicals, you have to have
service
watering, services. You're not gonna get away without having those things, but keeping an idea of what is happening in that area behind by the diocese, so that you're not lining up a trash room adjacent to that.
Sure.
And you may be able to pull in some amenity space or some areas that maybe work more in partnership with that new space than just your drive aisle for a garage or something else.
Everybody thinks Broad Street is the thing, but Broad Street's a very busy street. It's not a retail street. It's not a place that you really want to be hanging out along until they build the new busway system. But the opportunity to create something that's more internal as a placemaking, think of placemaking, that there could be something very special back there. And I agree, it's not retail. I don't think, but it's, and I don't know what it is, but I think that whole block, if you start to look at it, it needs something to activate all of those other properties around it. Having actually studied this area for somebody else.
So part of our other thought, it sounds like, potentially you could put residential, but even then we've got safety concerns just being in this area from kind of what we've seen. Someone did pass away on that site like a year ago.
It's all changing.
Now it is, yeah. So now, there's, pretty heavy foot traffic going to the Catholic Diocese services from the woods. They're all passing through.
Right.
That's our bigger concern, is really just that element of safety and what that means for future residents.
Well, I understand current challenges, but there's definitely an opportunity on the backside to do something.
So back to TJ, your point, what is based off of kind of where you're seeing here, where would you like to see utilities housed?
Because it's really, Skidmore next to the church, it seems to be, from our standpoint, is kind of from a traffic flow, seems to be the widest street to really make that the garage entrance into it if we're not going to do it on the backside. So we were kind of slating that as, okay, so that's the service in. Jump lobby, knowing that there's a phase 2 to this project, the jump lobby would be on the west side there. So we were thinking of services on that north face, but is it northwest, northeast? That's.
And part of that is to be sort of.
The other corner, yeah.
Minimal invasiveness to
You can still see
the conduit.
15, like anything like that. They develop the other site, so, yeah.
Honestly, a lot of it is just how you do it too. You could have, I've seen projects where, you've got loading hitting a pedestrian plaza for every single building, but it gets done really well with some buildings and which part. Yeah. So it's just how you do it. I mean, I think it's kind of too early in your process right now to even.
Is the expectation or the hope that you guys are going to develop that lot to the west to something that is of similar size, or?
Hard to say at this point.
I guess I say
larger,
that.
like it's going to be blocking anything you're seeing now that we're proposing.
I guess I say that because there are only 2 streets around that one, although the alley may come back on the north side of that, but that one also would have to have services and trash and maybe mirroring those 2 things on those back corners.
Throughout the gay on the corner there.
May be helpful, and that takes it away from the church a little bit. I mean,
The other thing is to put it in the center of the block.
Then just a function of service, yeah.
I think there's enough there to go to the next step with development. Are there any other comments based on what you're seeing right now?
I don't have any issues from a height or a massing or.
Existing buildings?
Certainly not with that location.
Buildings of this scale on West Broad.
Your cut-through section also, just in terms of that. So there's elements to the church, right, for the, where the walls come up and then the roof turns in. There's a data line, I think, related to that somehow be nice to respond to.
Well, and then that podium level that we're showing there in the green, that has a nice relationship to the sort of, gutter line that you're referring to. So yeah, I think there's something there that we can work with.
Keeping it a 5/2. I'm trying to think of a way to not lose 4 units or 6 units on each floor on that northeast or southeast corner by the church where you want to cut that out.
Thank you.
If maybe you could cut out just kind of a neat middle section, so you almost picture frame the church from Broad coming in, and it gives you a little bit more amenity that brings the amenity out towards Broad and gives you kind of a picture window of the church, but the 4th and 5th floors then still come back over top, or
take the north side of it. It's still 5/2. You still have a podium, but you push the podium up higher so that you get the.
Can't go over
75. Yeah, you'll go over 75 feet if you do that.
There's a height restriction on the frame.
So we have height restrictions.
No, building. Building.
Wood framing, yeah.
Wood framing, you can't go over.
Yeah.
But I like it.
We'll do it.
You made that happen.
You want to together.
Change the landscape.
No, I think there's enough here with the dialogue on that. I'm not, for me personally, I'm not interested in cutting the corner like Gravity 3 is. But I think we can modify the front building edge to kind of give a picture window view to the church facade. So I've got something in mind that we can do and not lose units. Got it? Yeah.
Man with a plan.
That's it. Trust.
We've given you enough to work with.
Super excited to come back.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the dialogue.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. We've worked through our agenda except for one item. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but before this meeting, Stephanie asked me if it would be prudent to have a business meeting for this particular meeting. Personal view. A business meeting is only useful if it saves more time than it uses, including travel time in the middle of the day. I don't know that a business meeting would have helped this one all that much, or more than a few minutes.
So really, all I wanted to do was just, since we have some new folks on, and it's my understanding coming into East Franklinton that you all don't do business meetings barely ever. So I just wanted to cover, the topic of, when we have your business meetings booked, I just cancel them. So they are reserved. They're scheduled for 2 weeks before the meeting. Here, staff would be here. Board members are recommended. It's not required, obviously, if you can't make it. But if we only have one person that can make it, that's where you start to lose value in having the session. And then the applicants would be optional. So I just wanted to kind of put it out there that business meetings are an option, and some of the reasons that we may consider having one would be, to ensure that the hearings run efficiently. If there's a super high case volume, this seems to be an anomaly. We'll see what next month brings. Or if there's some cases that may be super complex or controversial that we need to chat about before the meeting. So this is, I can send this out if you want to have it.
Please.
It's just explaining kind of what a business meeting is and what it's not. And I just wanted to, again, put it out there that business meetings are an option for East Franklinton if we think that it would be value added. I know our historic commissions have them every month.
as just a way for everyone to look at them and say, well, I'm going to have this question, so the applicant could just re-answer it, you know, if they can submit updated materials so that we don't have to have this conversation at the time.
And they get a lot of cases, so they're,
Yeah.
they're trying to, you know, we ask a lot of probably questions that we don't need to ask in this forum, that we could ask at a business meeting and get out of the way, so we come for this forum, we just, you know, can practice stuff. But I'd rather just tough it out here.
I think we did a great job of toughing it out today. I would say the only times is if we have like the river or the Gravity 3, their second conceptual review where they came with a kind of a full package and we spent an hour and a half on that. When Marker and Brad Parrish come back with more of a, depending on the meeting load, if there's a bunch of other things, then maybe we pull that to a business meeting beforehand. If not, and it's the only application in a month or two when they come back through, then there's no need for a business meeting.
Yeah, I'd rather not have 2 meetings when we can do it one.
Yeah, and I'm not asking for any like action or a commitment that we will start having business meetings. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that.
I think there's some guidance from us on when you might suggest one.
And I agree with this last one. I think because they're building next to a church, I think that's gonna cause us to really spend some time thinking about it.
And it's a big project.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of review and a lot of thoughts on their next, their next conceptual review is gonna be their big hump before they start.
But if it's our only case, we got 2 hours to do it.
And it doesn't matter. If we've got a big docket, then maybe we separate it.
Yeah.
And maybe
I want to talk just as much about the red stripe.
we should have pulled that off our business
Could have
meeting.
made a meal out of it.
No, I mean, seriously, we can spend days. All right, well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Are we going to close it for Saturday for the show? No, we're not doing anything.